The Kansas wind carried dust and desperation in equal measure. Caleb Mercer stood on the platform of the Hayes City Depot, watching the train crawl toward him like some massive iron beast. Summer 1868 had been brutal, the kind that baked the ground into clay and turned men's tempers sharp as barbed wire. He'd lost his first wife to cholera 2 winters back, and the ranch had been slowly dying with him ever since. Couldn't manage the land alone. Couldn't manage much of anything, if he was honest. So he'd done what lonely men on the frontier did when pride finally gave way to practicality. He'd sent for a bride. The advertisement had been simple, almost embarrassing in its plainness. Rancher, 34, seeks woman of good character for marriage and partnership. Hard work required. Honest treatment guaranteed. He'd paid $3 to run it in a Boston newspaper, then spent 6 weeks trying not to think about it. 3 letters came back. He chose Lydia Hale because her handwriting was steady, and she didn't make promises. Just said she was 22, capable of work, and needed a new start. Didn't dress it up with poetry or lies. That felt like something he could trust. Now the train was here, and his stomach was doing things he didn't appreciate. Caleb pulled his hat lower against the sun. He was a tall man, built like fence posts, functional, weathered, nothing fancy. His face had the kind of lines that came from squinting at horizons and keeping your mouth shut. Dark hair going gray at the temples, hands that knew rope burns and saw blades better than they knew gentleness. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. Maybe someone sturdy, plain-faced. The kind of woman who understood that frontier life didn't leave room for fragile things. The train shuddered to a halt with a scream of metal on metal. Steam poured across the platform. Passengers began climbing down. A cattle broker in a dusty suit, 2 soldiers heading west, a family with more children than luggage. Then he saw her. Lydia Hale stepped off that train like she was made of glass and trying not to shatter. She was small. That was the first thing. Barely came up to his shoulder, with a frame so slight the wind might carry her off if she wasn't careful. She wore a gray traveling dress that had seen better days, and her dark blonde hair was pulled back tight enough to hurt. But it was her face that stopped him cold. Pretty, in a way that didn't matter out here. But that wasn't what caught his attention. It was her eyes. They moved too fast, scanning the platform, the crowd, the buildings beyond, always looking for something, or looking out for something. Her shoulders were drawn up like she was waiting for a blow, and her hands clutched a single worn carpet bag with white knuckles. This wasn't a woman seeking adventure. This was a woman running. "Miss Hale?" he said, approaching slowly. She flinched, actually flinched, before she caught herself and forced her spine straight. "Mr. Mercer." Her voice was quiet. Too quiet. She didn't look at him directly, kept her gaze somewhere near his chest. "Thank you for meeting me. Wasn't about to leave you standing here." He reached for her bag. "Let me... I have it." The words came fast, defensive. She pulled the bag against her body like a shield. Caleb stopped, hands raised slightly. "All right." They stood there in awkward silence while the platform cleared around them. He could smell the train smoke and her fear in equal measure, and he had no damn idea what to do with either. "The wagon's this way," he finally said. She followed 3 steps behind him, and that felt wrong too, like she was being led somewhere she didn't want to go. The ride back to the ranch took 2 hours. Caleb tried conversation a few times, asked about her journey, commented on the weather, pointed out landmarks that might mean something once she'd been here a while. She answered in single sentences. "Yes. No. It was fine. I see." Her body stayed rigid the entire time, pressed as far against her side of the wagon bench as physics would allow. Every time the wheels hit a rut and jostled them closer together, she went still as death. By the time they reached his property, Caleb's jaw ached from clenching it. The ranch wasn't much to look at. A sturdy house he'd built himself from cottonwood and determination, a barn that leaned slightly west, fencing that needed mending in a dozen places, 50 acres of stubborn prairie that fought him for every crop. But it was his, and he thought maybe she'd see the potential in it. Instead, Lydia stared at it like she was memorizing the layout of a prison. "I know it's not fancy," he said, climbing down and tying off the horses. "But it's sound. Roof doesn't leak. Well, water's clean. It's fine." That phrase again. Flat, empty. He helped her down from the wagon. She let him, barely, her hand rigid in his, and carried her bag to the house. The door stuck like it always did. He had to put his shoulder into it. Inside, the main room was sparse. Table, chairs, a cooking stove he'd spent too much money on, his wife's old rocking chair that he couldn't bring himself to get rid of. Bedroom off to one side, a small loft above for storage, or maybe children someday, though that thought felt presumptuous now. "You can put your things in there," he said, nodding toward the bedroom. I'll sleep in the loft for now, until you're comfortable." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. "That's not necessary," she said quietly. "We're married. Or we will be. We'll see the minister tomorrow. Make it legal." Caleb set her bag down carefully. "But there's no rush on the rest of it. I understand my obligations, Mr. Mercer." The way she said obligations made his stomach turn, like she was discussing a debt to be paid. "I'm not asking for obligations," he said, and his voice came out harder than he meant. "I'm asking for time." She looked at him then. Really looked at him, for the first time since the depot. Her eyes were the color of creek water in winter, gray-green and deep enough to drown in, and so tired, so goddamn tired. "As you wish," she said. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay in the loft, staring at the rough wooden beams above his head, listening to the silence from the bedroom below. She hadn't made a sound in hours, hadn't eaten the supper he'd put together either, just pushed the food around her plate and said she wasn't hungry. Something was badly wrong here, and he had no idea how to fix it. He'd thought marriage would be simple, not easy, but simple. Two people making a practical choice to survive together. Respect, maybe. Companionship, eventually. He hadn't expected love, that seemed like asking too much after Martha, but he'd expected something, some foundation to build on. This felt like he'd brought home a wounded animal that might bite him if he moved too fast. Around midnight, he heard it, crying. Quiet, muffled, the kind that came from someone who'd learned to cry without making noise. Caleb sat up, every instinct screaming at him to do something. Go down there, ask what was wrong, fix it somehow. But he didn't move, because he was starting to understand that whatever was breaking Lydia Hale apart, it had been breaking her for a long time. And a stranger climbing down from the loft in the dark might be the last thing she needed. So he stayed where he was, hands clenched into fists, and hated himself a little bit for it. The crying eventually stopped. Morning came too early and too bright. Caleb found Lydia already awake, standing by the stove with her back to him. She'd put on a different dress, still gray, still buttoned up to her throat, and her hair was pulled back even tighter than yesterday. "Morning," he said. "Good morning." She didn't turn around. "I made coffee. I hope that's all right." "More than all right." He poured himself a cup. The coffee was terrible, weak and bitter at the same time, but he drank it anyway. "You didn't have to." "I should earn my keep." There it was again, that transactional way of talking, like she was a hired hand instead of his wife. "Lydia, we should see the minister today." She said it to the wall. "You said we would." "Right, yes." Caleb set down his cup. "I'll hitch the wagon." The ceremony was brief and uncomfortable. Reverend Hutchins was a decent man, but he had the frontier habit of not asking questions when the answers might be awkward. He read the words from his book, had them repeat the vows, and pronounced them married in the sight of whatever passed for law this far from civilization. Lydia's hand shook when Caleb slipped the simple gold band on her finger, the one that had been Martha's, though he didn't mention that. "You may kiss the bride," Hutchins said. Caleb looked at Lydia. She'd gone pale, her breathing shallow. "That's all right," he said to the minister. "We're good." On the ride back, Lydia finally spoke without being prompted. "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" "Not—" She gestured vaguely. "The minister said you could kiss me." Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Didn't seem like you wanted me to." Silence stretched between them. Then, so quiet he almost missed it. "Thank you." Something in his chest loosened slightly. Not hope, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The first week was a study in careful distance. Lydia moved through the house like a ghost, trying to make herself useful without taking up space. She cooked, poorly, but she tried. She attempted to mend a shirt and made it worse. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning and avoided things that did. And she never, ever relaxed. Caleb watched her fold in on herself whenever he came too close, saw the way she tracked his movements like she was calculating escape routes. It reminded him of the wild horses that sometimes wandered onto his land, beautiful and terrified and ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. He started making noise when he moved through the house, knocked on door frames before entering rooms, kept his voice low and his gestures small. It was like gentling a frightened animal, except she was a person, and that made it infinitely more complicated. On the 8th day, he found her struggling with the water pump. The handle had a trick to it. You had to work it just right or it would stick. He'd been meaning to fix it for months but kept putting it off. Now Lydia was yanking on it with increasing frustration, her face flushed with effort and embarrassment. "Here," Caleb said, stepping up beside her. "It's stubborn. You have to—" He reached for the handle. She jerked back so hard she stumbled, and her sleeve rode up her arm. Caleb froze. Bruises. Old ones, faded to yellow-green, circling her wrist like fingerprints. And above those, older scars, thin white lines that had healed badly. Lydia saw him looking, saw him seeing. Her face crumpled for just a second before she yanked her sleeve down and turned away. "I'll figure it out," she said, her voice breaking on the edges. "Lydia, please don't." He wanted to ask, wanted to demand to know who'd done this to her and how he could find them. Wanted to burn the whole world down for putting those marks on her skin. But he stepped back instead. "I'll fix the pump," he said quietly. "Should have done it weeks ago." She didn't respond, just stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, shaking. That night, Caleb made a decision. He'd been sleeping in the loft, giving her space, telling himself it was the right thing to do. But space wasn't going to fix this. Space was just another word for avoidance. So after supper, which she barely touched again, he sat down across from her at the table. "I need to know something," he said. Lydia's hands stilled on the cup of tea she wasn't drinking. "What?" "The bruises on your arm." He kept his voice level, calm. "Did someone hurt you?" Her knuckles went white around the cup. "That's none of your concern. You're my wife. It's exactly my concern." "I'm property," she said, and the bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. "That's what wives are, Mr. Mercer. Property that changes hands from one man to another. The bruises came with the transaction." "That's not—" He stopped himself, got his anger under control. "That's not what this is, isn't it?" She finally looked at him, and her eyes were blazing. "You paid for a bride. I came because I had nowhere else to go. We signed papers. That's a transaction." "Maybe it started that way," Caleb said carefully. "But I'm not interested in owning you, Lydia. I'm interested in— In what? Having a wife who cooks and cleans and spreads her legs when you want? That's what marriage is." The crudeness of it shocked him. But beneath the anger, he could hear the fear, the bone-deep terror that made her lash out like a cornered animal. "Is that what you were taught?" he asked quietly. Her face crumpled. Just for a second, the armor cracked, and he saw the girl underneath, young and broken and so tired of being afraid. "I should go to bed," she whispered. "Lydia, please." She stood up, the chair scraping loud against the floor. "I'm very tired." She fled to the bedroom and shut the door. Caleb sat at the table for a long time after that, his coffee going cold, trying to understand what he'd gotten himself into. Someone had hurt her, badly, repeatedly. That much was clear. But who? And how did a woman get that kind of damage carved into her soul? He thought about the advertisement she'd answered, the fact that she'd traveled halfway across the country to marry a complete stranger, the way she moved through the world like she was expecting pain at every turn. This wasn't just about bruises, this was about survival, and somehow he'd become her last desperate choice. The realization settled on him like a weight. He'd wanted a wife to help with the ranch, to fill the silence Martha had left behind. He'd wanted simple and practical. What he'd gotten was complicated and shattered. The question was, what was he going to do about it? 3 days later, Lydia burned breakfast. Not just burned it, turned it into charcoal. The eggs were black. The bacon was ash. The coffee boiled over and left a burnt sugar smell that would probably linger for days. She stood at the stove staring at the disaster, and Caleb could see her shoulders starting to shake. "It's just breakfast," he said from the doorway. "I can't even do this right." Her voice was thick with unshed tears. "I can't cook. I can't clean properly. I can't manage the simplest things. I'm useless. You're learning. I'm 22 years old. I should know how to. She broke off, her hands gripping the edge of the stove. What good am I if I can't even feed you? Caleb crossed the room slowly, telegraphing his movements. Can I tell you something? She didn't respond, but she didn't move away either. My first wife, Martha. She couldn't cook worth a damn either. First year we were married, I think I lost 10 pounds. He smiled at the memory, even though it hurt. She tried. Lord, she tried. But everything came out either raw or burnt, no in between. So you know what we did? Lydia shook her head. I cooked. I already knew how, had to, after my mother died, so I taught Martha how to do other things instead. She was better with the animals than I was, had a way with the difficult ones, could calm a spooked horse just by talking to it. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Point is, marriage isn't about one person doing everything right. It's about figuring out what you're each good at and making it work. I'm not good at anything, Lydia whispered. That's not true. What am I good at then? She turned to face him, and her eyes were red-rimmed but defiant. Tell me one useful thing I've done since I got here. Caleb thought about it, really thought about it. You fixed the squeaky hinge on the bedroom door, he said. She blinked. What? The hinge. It squeaked for months, drove me crazy. You must have oiled it or something, because it doesn't squeak anymore. That's nothing. It's not nothing. It's something I didn't do that needed doing. He gestured at the ruined breakfast. How about we clean this up and I'll show you some tricks for the stove. It runs hot on the left side. Once you know that, it's easier. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the smallest crack in the wall she'd built around herself. They cleaned up the mess together, working in silence. Then Caleb walked her through making a simple breakfast. How to judge the heat, when to flip things, how to keep the coffee from boiling over. She was clumsy at first, second-guessing every movement, but her hands were steady when they needed to be, and she paid attention in a way that suggested she was used to learning quickly or facing consequences. The breakfast that resulted wasn't good exactly, but it was edible, and when she took her first bite, he saw something like pride flicker across her face. Better, she said quietly. Much better. They ate in silence. Not the uncomfortable silence from before, but something gentler, almost peaceful. Then Lydia set down her fork and looked at him directly. Victor Hale, she said. Caleb waited. That's who gave me the bruises, and the scars, and, she swallowed hard, everything else. Your father? Stepfather. The word came out like poison. My mother married him when I was 17. She died 6 months later. Pneumonia, and then it was just me and him. Her hands were shaking now, but she kept talking, like if she stopped, she'd never be able to start again. He said I owed him, for taking me in, for feeding me, for keeping a roof over my head. Said I had to earn my place in his house. Her voice dropped. There were a lot of ways to earn your place. Caleb's hands clenched into fists under the table. Did he? He tried. She met his eyes, and there was steel beneath the fear. I fought him off the first time, broke his nose. After that, he mostly stuck to hitting, burning things I cared about, breaking my things, making sure I knew I was nothing. For 5 years? 5 years. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I tried to leave twice. First time, he found me at the train station. Second time, I made it to a town 30 miles away before he dragged me back. After that, I stopped trying. What changed? He started talking about marrying me off, said he could get good money for a young wife, even one as worthless as me. Her jaw tightened. That's when I saw your advertisement. Caleb felt sick. So you came here because I thought being married to a stranger on the frontier was better than staying with him. She looked away. I thought at least if you killed me, it would be over quickly. The words landed like a physical blow. Lydia, I know you're not him. She said it quickly, desperately. I know you haven't hurt me. I know you've been kind, but my body doesn't know that yet. My mind doesn't know that yet. Every time you move too fast or raise your voice or reach for me without warning, all I can feel is his hands and all I can hear is his voice telling me I'm worthless, and all I can think is that I made a mistake coming here. Tears were sliding down her face now, but she didn't seem to notice. So I'm sorry I can't be a proper wife. I'm sorry I flinch and cry and burn the breakfast. I'm sorry I'm broken. But this is what you got when you sent for a mail-order bride. This is what you paid for. Caleb stood up slowly, moved around the table, and crouched down beside her chair. Not too close, giving her space to bolt if she needed it. Listen to me, he said quietly. I didn't pay for anything. I paid $3 to run an advertisement, that's all. You're not property. You're not a transaction. You're a person who survived something terrible, and I'm... His voice broke slightly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry you had to run this far to feel safe. And I'm sorry I don't know how to make it better. Lydia stared at him, her eyes wide and wet. I won't hurt you, Caleb continued. I won't force you into anything. And I won't let him, Victor, I won't let him get to you. Do you understand? You're safe here. You can't promise that. I can. And I am. She searched his face like she was looking for the lie, the trap, the moment when the mask would slip and he'd become something else. But Caleb had never been good at masks. His face showed everything, the anger at what had been done to her, the sorrow that she'd suffered so long, the determination to make sure it never happened again. Whatever she saw there, it made her shoulders drop slightly. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I'll try to believe you. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, Caleb slept in the loft again. But before bed, Lydia did something unexpected. She opened the bedroom door, left it open instead of closing it like she had every other night. And in the morning, he found her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, waiting for him. Not hiding, not running, just there. It was the smallest thing. But on the Kansas frontier, where survival was measured in inches and trust was harder to earn than gold, it felt like victory. The days that followed moved like water finding its level, slow, uncertain, but gradually settling into something that resembled routine. Caleb woke before dawn like always, started the fire, put coffee on. The difference now was that Lydia appeared within minutes, her hair already pinned back, her dress buttoned to the throat. She didn't say much those first mornings. Just took over the coffee while he went out to feed the horses and check the fences. By the time he came back in, there'd be eggs on the table. Sometimes they were good, sometimes they weren't. He ate them either way and never complained. She watched him like she was waiting for the criticism, the explosion, the moment when he'd throw the plate across the room and tell her she was worthless, just like Victor had probably done 1,000 times. But Caleb just ate his breakfast, thanked her for it, and asked if she needed anything from town when he went in for supplies. The answer was always no. On the 4th morning after her confession, she finally broke the silence over breakfast. Why are you being so patient? Caleb looked up from his eggs. What do you mean? I mean, she gestured vaguely with her fork. Most men wouldn't be. Most men would have already... we're married. You have rights. I don't want rights. I want a partner. That's not how marriage works. Maybe it should be. She stared at him like he'd started speaking another language. You're very strange, Mr. Mercer. Caleb, he said. You can call me Caleb. That feels too familiar. We're married. Familiar is kind of the point. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Just for a second. I'll think about it. He took that as progress. Later that week, he found her in the barn trying to figure out how to saddle his gelding, a bad-tempered gray named Tucker who'd earned his reputation by biting 3 different stable hands back in town. Whoa, Caleb said, moving quickly. Maybe start with something else. Lydia jumped at his voice, then turned to face him with that defensive look he was learning to recognize. I need to learn to ride. Agreed, but Tucker's not the horse for learning. He's the only horse here. No, there's the mare too, Rosie. She's older, steadier, won't try to throw you just for the hell of it. The brown one in the far stall? That's her. Caleb moved past Lydia, slowly, giving her space, and started unsaddling Tucker, who snorted his displeasure. Besides, before you ride, you should learn how to handle them on the ground. Get comfortable with the size of them. I'm not afraid of horses. Didn't say you were, but they're big. And if you don't know what you're doing, they can hurt you by accident. She considered this, her arms crossed over her chest. Will you teach me? If you want. I do. She paused. I need to be able to leave if I have to. The words hit him harder than they should have. Of course she was thinking about escape routes. Of course she needed to know she could run if this all went bad. All right, he said quietly. We'll start today. They spent the next hour in the corral with Rosie, who was patient in the way old horses get when they've seen every kind of fool humanity has to offer. Caleb showed Lydia how to approach, how to read the mare's body language, how to touch without spooking her. Lydia was hesitant at first, her movements stiff and uncertain. But as Rosie stood there placidly, unbothered by the nervous woman patting her neck, something in Lydia began to soften. She's warm, Lydia said, almost wonderingly. They run hot. It's nice in winter, less nice in summer. Does she bite? Not unless you stick your fingers where they shouldn't go. She's a good girl. Aren't you, Rosie? The mare flicked an ear at him, supremely unconcerned. Lydia ran her hand along Rosie's shoulder, down her leg. The mare shifted her weight, but didn't move away. She trusts you, Lydia said. She trusts most people. It's the young ones that are flighty. How long did it take to trust you? Caleb had the feeling they weren't talking about the horse anymore. Hard to say. She came to me already broke to saddle, but I'd guess someone treated her decent from the start, so she never learned to be afraid. Lydia's hand stilled on Rosie's flank. That must be nice. What must? Never learning to be afraid. The ache in her voice made his chest tight. He wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease that old pain. But comfort had never been his strong suit, and empty words felt worse than silence. Fear keeps you alive sometimes, he said instead, but it's a hard thing to carry every day. Yes. She kept stroking the mare's side. It is. They worked with Rosie for another 20 minutes before the afternoon heat got to be too much. Caleb showed Lydia how to brush the mare down, how to check her hooves for stones, how to measure out feed. Practical things. Tasks with clear beginnings and endings. Lydia absorbed it all with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing survival skills, not just learning ranch work. When they finished, she turned to him with something almost like eagerness in her face. Tomorrow? Can we do this tomorrow? Every day if you want. I want. That became their new routine. Mornings were for chores and breakfast. Afternoons, when the worst heat had passed, were for the horses. Caleb taught her to saddle and bridle, to mount and dismount, to sit a walk and then a trot. She fell twice in the first week, nothing serious, just the inevitable tumbles that came with learning. And both times she got up angry at herself, determined to do it right. She didn't cry, didn't ask to stop, just set her jaw and climbed back on. Caleb found himself respecting the hell out of that. One evening, about 3 weeks into her stay, he was fixing the corral fence when Lydia came out with 2 cups of water. She'd taken to doing that lately, bringing him drinks while he worked, standing nearby but not too close, watching what he did with that same intense focus she brought to everything. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why aren't you angry? He looked up from the post he was setting. About what? About me? About this? She gestured between them. You sent for a wife. You got someone who can barely cook, who flinches when you move too fast, who won't. She stopped, her cheeks coloring slightly. Who can't be a proper wife to you? Caleb set down his hammer. You want the truth? Please. I'm not angry because I didn't send for a perfect woman. I sent for a person, and people are complicated. He pulled off his work gloves, buying himself time to find the right words. My first marriage, with Martha, that wasn't perfect either. We fought about stupid things. She hated how I left my boots by the door. I hated how she hummed the same song over and over while she worked. We were still figuring each other out when she died. That's different. How? You loved her. Eventually. Not at first. He met her eyes. Love isn't something that just happens, Lydia. It's something you build, like a house or a fence or anything else worth having. It takes time and work, and I might never be able to give you that. Maybe not. He shrugged. But I'd rather have an honest try at something real than pretend everything's fine when it isn't. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she set down the water cups and picked up a fence post. Show me how to do this, she said. The fence? All of it. If I'm going to be here, I should know how things work, how to fix things, how to... She struggled with the words. How to survive without you if I need to. It should have hurt, that assumption that he might not be around. But Caleb understood what she was really asking for. Independence, self-sufficiency, the ability to stand on her own 2 feet. All right, he said, hand me that post digger. They worked until the sun went down, and Caleb taught her how to set fence posts properly. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but she didn't quit. That night, after a silent supper, Lydia paused at the bedroom door. Caleb? It was the first time she'd used his name. He tried not to show how much that meant. Yeah? Thank you. For today. You did the work. For letting me do the work, then. She hesitated. Most men wouldn't. Most men are fools. She smiled, a real smile this time, not just a ghost of one, and something in his chest loosened. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could build something here that resembled a life. The thought lasted exactly 3 more days. Caleb had ridden into Hayes City for supplies, flour, sugar, nails, a new saw blade. He'd asked Lydia if she wanted to come, but she'd declined. Said she had things to do around the house. And besides, she wasn't ready to face crowds yet. He understood that. Crowds meant questions. Questions meant explaining who she was and where she'd come from, and those were answers she probably wasn't ready to give. So he'd gone alone, leaving her with the rifle by the door and instructions to shoot first if anyone she didn't know came around. The trip to town took most of the morning. He loaded up the wagon, stopped by the land office to pay his property tax, ran into Bill Hutchins at the general store, and got trapped in a 20-minute conversation about cattle prices and railway expansion. Normal frontier business. He was loading the last of the supplies when he noticed a man watching him from across the street. Tall. Well-dressed for this part of the country, in a coat and vest that hadn't seen hard labor. Dark hair slicked back with pomade, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't twisted into an expression of poorly disguised contempt. The man caught Caleb looking and started across the street toward him. "You Mercer?" the man called out. Caleb straightened, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun at his hip. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Victor Hale." He said it like Caleb should be impressed. "I'm looking for my daughter. I believe you might know where she is." Everything inside Caleb went cold and sharp. "Your daughter. Stepdaughter, technically, but I raised her after her mother died. She's my responsibility." Victor stopped a few feet away, looking Caleb up and down with obvious disdain. "I heard through certain channels that she might have ended up out this way. Married to some homesteader." "Channels? I have my sources. The question is, are you the homesteader in question?" Caleb kept his expression neutral, his voice level. "Don't know anyone named Hale." "No?" Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because I have a letter here, sent to my address back east from a marriage broker in Kansas. Says a young woman matching my Lydia's description got married to a rancher named Caleb Mercer about a month ago." He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his coat. Caleb didn't need to read it to know what it said. "Marriage brokers send out a lot of letters," Caleb said carefully. "Doesn't mean I'm the man you're looking for." "You're a terrible liar, Mr. Mercer." Victor tucked the letter away. "But that's all right. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want my daughter back." "She's not property you can just take back." "Oh, but she is." Victor's voice dropped, taking on an edge that made Caleb's fingers itch for his gun. "You see, Lydia owes me a considerable debt. Money I spent raising her, feeding her, keeping a roof over her ungrateful head. She ran off without paying what she owed. That's theft, Mr. Mercer, and theft is a crime. That's not how family works. You'd be surprised how many lawmen disagree with you." Victor glanced around the street, nodding toward the sheriff's office 2 buildings down. "I could go talk to Sheriff Daniels right now, file a complaint, have papers drawn up. Make this very complicated for you and for her." Caleb's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "What do you want?" "I want my daughter returned to me, unmarried, if possible. Her virtue intact, though I suspect you've already ruined that." Victor's smile was poisonous. "But I'm a reasonable man. If you've already consummated the marriage, I suppose I could be persuaded to accept monetary compensation instead. Say, $500? "I don't have $500. "Then I guess we'll have to involve the law after all." Victor turned toward the sheriff's office. "Such a shame. I hear they're quite harsh on thieves out here, and on the men who harbor them." Caleb grabbed his arm. It was a mistake. He knew it the second he made contact, but rage was overriding sense, and the thought of this bastard dragging Lydia back to whatever hell she'd escaped from was more than he could stand. Victor looked down at Caleb's hand on his sleeve, then back up at Caleb's face. His expression shifted into something triumphant. Assaulting me in broad daylight, in front of witnesses. He raised his voice slightly. That's quite bold, Mr. Mercer. Caleb released him, stepping back. Several townspeople had stopped to watch. This was exactly what Victor wanted, a scene, attention, leverage. I'll talk to her, Caleb said through gritted teeth. See if she wants to see you. How magnanimous, but I'm afraid that won't work. Victor brushed off his sleeve where Caleb had touched it. You see, Lydia's been troubled for some time, prone to hysteria and wild accusations. I can't trust her to make rational decisions about her own welfare. She's 22 years old. She can make her own decisions, not according to the law, not when there's a question of mental competence. Victor's smile widened. I have doctors back east who'll testify to her unstable nature, who'll say she needs to be in my care for her own protection. It was a trap, a carefully constructed web of lies and legal technicalities designed to corner Lydia and drag her back into Victor's control. And Caleb had no idea how to fight it. I need time, he said finally, to talk to her, to figure this out. You have until tomorrow afternoon. I'm staying at the hotel. Come by with Lydia, or with $500, and we can settle this peacefully. Victor tipped his hat mockingly. Otherwise, I'll be visiting the sheriff, and then I'll be visiting your ranch with a lawman in tow. Your choice, Mr. Mercer. He walked away, his expensive boots clicking on the wooden boardwalk. Caleb stood there, his heart hammering, his mind racing through possibilities and finding nothing but dead ends. He couldn't let Victor take her, but he couldn't stop him either, not without breaking laws that would get him arrested or killed. $500 might as well be $5,000. He didn't have that kind of money. The ranch barely turned a profit in good years, which meant tomorrow Victor Hale was going to show up at his door with a sheriff and a legal right to reclaim his stepdaughter. And Lydia was going to be dragged back into hell. The ride home took forever. Caleb's mind spun through scenarios, each worse than the last. They could run, pack up tonight, and head for the territories where law was sparse and questions were scarce. But Victor had already found them once. He'd find them again. They could fight, refuse to cooperate, dare Victor to make good on his threats. But that just meant lawmen, trials, public scrutiny. And in the end, the law would probably side with Victor anyway. Fathers had rights, husbands had rights. Women, especially ones accused of being mentally incompetent, had almost none. They could try to buy time, plead for an extension, promise to gather the money somehow. But Victor didn't seem like the patient type. By the time Caleb reached the ranch, the sun was setting and his options had narrowed to one inescapable truth. He had to tell Lydia. She was waiting on the porch when he pulled up, and the relief on her face when she saw him damn near broke his heart. You're late, she said, coming down the steps. I was starting to worry. Had some trouble in town. Something in his voice made her stop. What kind of trouble? Caleb climbed down from the wagon, started unloading supplies, kept his hands busy so they wouldn't shake. The kind that involves your stepfather. The color drained from her face. He's here? Her voice came out small, childlike. In Kansas? In Hays City. At the hotel. How did he... She wrapped her arms around herself. How did he find me? Marriage broker sent a letter to your old address. He traced it here. Caleb set down the sack of flour more carefully than necessary. He knows we're married. He's demanding either you come back with him or I pay him $500. 500? Lydia's laugh was edged with hysteria. That's insane. I don't owe him anything. He says you do. Says he has legal grounds to claim you as a debtor. And if I don't cooperate, he's going to the sheriff. The fear on her face had transformed into something else, something harder. I won't go back. Her hands clenched into fists. I'll die before I go back to him. You're not going back. You can't stop him. He'll bring the law. He'll twist everything until it sounds like I'm the criminal, like I'm crazy, like I... Lydia. Caleb crossed to her, slow and deliberate. Listen to me. You are not going back. I don't care what I have to do or who I have to fight. That's not happening. You don't understand what he's like. Then tell me. She stared at him, breathing hard. Then the words came tumbling out in a rush, like poison she'd been holding in too long. He's smart. That's what makes him dangerous. He doesn't just hit you and leave marks where people can see. He knows exactly how to hurt you without evidence, without witnesses. He'll smile at the sheriff and say, "I'm mentally unstable." He'll produce letters from doctors he paid off, saying I need to be in his care. He'll make it sound like he's the concerned father, and I'm the troubled girl who ran away from home. Her voice broke. And everyone will believe him, because he's respectable and I'm nobody. Because he has money and I have nothing. Because that's how the world works. Caleb wanted to argue. Wanted to say she was wrong, that justice would prevail, that the truth mattered. But he'd lived long enough to know that sometimes the world didn't work the way it should. "We have until tomorrow afternoon," he said instead. "He gave us that long to decide. There's nothing to decide. We can't pay him. And I won't go back." She met his eyes. "So what does that leave?" "I don't know yet." They stood there in the gathering darkness, the unloaded wagon between them, the weight of tomorrow pressing down like a storm about to break. Finally, Lydia spoke. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing this to your door, for making you a part of my mess. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you. But you could have just, when he showed up, you could have told him where I was. Washed your hands of the whole problem." Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd survived 5 years of hell, who'd crossed half a country to escape, who was still standing even now with her worst nightmare camped 12 miles away. "That was never an option," he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not hope, exactly, but recognition. Like she was finally starting to believe that he meant what he said. "Come on," Caleb said gently. "Let's get this wagon unloaded. Then we'll figure out what comes next." They worked in silence, carrying supplies into the house. When everything was inside, Caleb built up the fire while Lydia stood by the window, staring out into the darkness like she was expecting Victor to materialize from the shadows. "I learned to shoot," she said suddenly. "What?" "After the second time he dragged me back. I stole money from his coat, bought a pistol from a pawn shop, taught myself to shoot in the woods behind his house." She turned to face Caleb. "I was going to kill him. That was my plan. Wait until he was drunk and asleep, put the gun to his head, and end it." "Why didn't you?" "Because I knew they'd hang me for it. And even if dying meant being free of him, it felt like he'd still win, like I'd still be letting him destroy me." Her jaw tightened. "So I sold the gun, saved the money, and waited for another way out. And then I saw your advertisement." Caleb sat down heavily at the table. "I'm not a violent man, Lydia. Never have been. But if Victor Hale shows up at this door tomorrow trying to take you, don't." She crossed the room, sat down across from him. "Don't make threats you're not willing to follow through on. That's one thing I learned. Men like Victor, they feed on empty threats. They know most people won't actually do anything." "I'm not most people. I know." She reached across the table, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she took his hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly, but she didn't pull away. "But I won't let you throw your life away for me. If it comes to that, if he brings the sheriff and the law says I have to go, I'll leave quietly. Like hell you will. And then, when no one's watching, I'll run again. I'm good at running now." "You shouldn't have to be." "But I am." She squeezed his hand. "The difference this time is I won't be running toward nothing. I'll know that somewhere out there, someone actually gave a damn whether I lived or died. That's more than I had before." The words settled between them like a vow. They sat there for a long time, hands clasped across the table, neither of them knowing what tomorrow would bring, but both of them refusing to let go. Eventually, Lydia stood. "I should sleep, or try to." She paused at the bedroom door. Would you mind staying down here tonight instead of the loft?" "You sure? I think I'll sleep better knowing you're close." So Caleb made up a bedroll by the fire while Lydia disappeared into the bedroom. He could hear her moving around, the soft sounds of her preparing for bed. Then silence. He lay there staring at the ceiling beams, thinking about Victor Hale's smug face, about the way the law could be twisted to serve men like him, about how many Lydias were out there, trapped in situations they couldn't escape because the world had decided their suffering didn't matter. Sometime after midnight, he heard it. A soft sound from the bedroom. Not crying this time. Something else. Caleb? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yeah? Are you awake? Can't sleep. A pause. Then, me neither. Another silence. Then the bedroom door opened, and Lydia appeared in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders for the first time since he'd known her. Can I? She gestured toward the fire. Would it be all right if I sat with you? Of course. She settled on the floor near his bedroll, drawing her knees up to her chest. The firelight caught her face, making her look younger and older at the same time. I keep thinking about tomorrow, she said, about all the ways it could go wrong. Me too. Do you think he'll actually bring the sheriff? Probably. Men like him don't make empty threats. No, they don't. She rested her chin on her knees. I wish I was braver. You're the bravest person I know. She laughed softly. I'm terrified right now. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you keep going anyway. Is that what you were when your wife died? The question caught him off guard. I don't know if I'd call it brave, more like stubborn, too dumb to know when to quit. Tell me about her, about Martha. So Caleb did. He told her about meeting Martha at a church social, about how she'd had flour on her nose and laughed when he pointed it out. About their wedding, simple and small, just a few friends and a minister. About building the ranch together, fighting the land and the weather and their own stubborn natures. About watching her waste away from cholera while he stood by helplessly, unable to do a damn thing except hold her hand and lie about how she'd get better. I'm sorry, Lydia said when he finished. That must have been awful. It was. Still is some days. He stared into the fire. But it taught me something. What? That life's too short to waste on being afraid. Martha, she was terrified of horses. Absolutely terrified. But she learned to ride anyway because she knew she'd need to out here. And by the end, she loved it. Used to race me across the north pasture just to prove she could win. He smiled at the memory. Point is, fear doesn't have to stop you. It can just be something you carry while you do what needs doing. Lydia was quiet for a long moment. Then she shifted closer, until her shoulder was almost touching his. Thank you, she said. For what? For not making me feel weak for being afraid. You're not weak, Lydia. You survived 5 years of hell. That takes strength most people don't have. Then why do I still feel broken? Because healing takes time, and because some breaks don't heal clean. He turned to look at her. But broken doesn't mean useless. Doesn't mean you can't build something new from the pieces. She met his eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or just the recognition that they were both damaged people trying to make something whole. I don't want to run tomorrow, she said quietly. I'm tired of running. Then we'll stand. Together? Together. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He went very still, afraid to move and break whatever fragile trust had brought her this close. They sat like that until the fire burned down to embers and the first gray light of dawn started creeping through the windows. Then Lydia stood, brushed off her nightgown, and looked down at him with something like determination in her eyes. Whatever happens today, she said, I want you to know that coming here, meeting you, it was the best decision I ever made. Before he could respond, she disappeared back into the bedroom. Caleb sat there in the growing light, his shoulders still warm where her head had rested, and wondered if it was possible to care this much about someone after just a few weeks. But he already knew the answer, because somewhere between teaching her to ride and watching her face her fears and listening to her story, he'd stopped thinking of her as the mail-order bride who'd answered his advertisement. She was just Lydia. And tomorrow, when Victor Hale came for her, he was going to find out what happened when you tried to break something that was already learning to rebuild itself. The morning came, whether they wanted it to or not. Caleb was already outside checking the horses when Lydia emerged from the house. She'd changed into her plainest dress, dark blue, high-necked, long-sleeved despite the heat. Armor disguised as modesty. Her hair was pulled back so tight it must have hurt, and her face had that blank, shuttered look he'd seen that first day at the depot. She was preparing for war the only way she knew how, by making herself invisible. You don't have to do that, he said. She looked down at herself. Do what? Make yourself small. He's not here yet. Practice. Her voice was flat. If I can hold it together now, maybe I can hold it together when he shows up. Caleb wanted to argue, but he understood the logic. So instead he just nodded and went back to checking Tucker's shoes, giving her space to build whatever walls she needed. They didn't talk much over breakfast. Lydia made eggs that came out surprisingly good, but neither of them had much appetite. The food sat on their plates getting cold while they both stared at the door like Victor might kick it in at any moment. "What time did he say?" Lydia finally asked. "Afternoon. Didn't give a specific hour." "So we just wait. Unless you want to ride into town, face him on neutral ground." She shook her head quickly. "No, here. If it happens here." "Why?" "Because this is the only place I've ever felt safe. And I want to remember what that feels like when—" She stopped herself. "If things go bad?" The clock on the mantel ticked away the seconds. Caleb cleaned his rifle even though it didn't need cleaning, then cleaned his pistol too. Lydia washed the breakfast dishes twice, reorganized the pantry, swept the floor until the broom bristles were probably worn down to nubs. Around noon, Caleb made them both eat something, bread and cheese, simple food that wouldn't sit heavy if trouble came. 1 o'clock passed, then 2. "Maybe he won't come," Lydia said, but her voice held no conviction. "He'll come." "How do you know?" "Because men like him always do." At 2:30, they heard it, the distant sound of a wagon coming up the road. Multiple horses. Voices. Lydia went white. Her hands started shaking so badly she had to clasp them together to hide it. Caleb moved to the window, keeping himself between Lydia and whatever was coming. 2 riders and a wagon. He recognized Victor immediately, still dressed too fancy for frontier life, sitting his horse like he owned the world. Next to him was Sheriff Tom Daniels, a decent man most days, but one who followed the letter of the law even when the spirit of it was rotten. The third man was driving the wagon, younger, thick-necked, probably hired muscle in case things got ugly. "It's him," Caleb said quietly. "He brought the sheriff." "Of course he did." Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. "That's how he operates. Makes everything look legal and proper while he destroys you. You want to hide? I can tell them you're not here. He'll just come back with a warrant, or break in when you're gone." She straightened her spine, forced her shoulders back. "No, I'm done hiding." The wagon stopped in front of the house. Victor dismounted with theatrical precision, brushing dust from his coat like he was arriving at a society function instead of a homestead confrontation. Sheriff Daniels climbed down more slowly, his hand resting on his gun belt in that casual way lawmen had when they were expecting trouble. Caleb stepped outside before they could knock. "Sheriff, Victor, Mr. Mercer." Daniels tipped his hat. He was a weathered man in his 50s with gray in his beard and the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much of humanity's worst. "I'm afraid we have some business to discuss." "What kind of business?" Victor stepped forward, all false concern and syrupy righteousness. "The kind involving my daughter, Mr. Mercer. I believe you're harboring her against her will." "Against her will? We're married." "A marriage entered into under false pretenses." Victor pulled papers from his coat. "I have documentation here showing that Lydia Hale is mentally incompetent to enter into legal contracts, including marriage contracts. That's bullshit. Language, Mr. Mercer." Victor's smile was poisonous. "I also have documentation showing that Miss Hale owes me considerable debt for her upbringing and care. Debts she fled without repaying. That makes her a criminal, and you an accomplice to her crimes." Sheriff Daniels looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Hale presented these papers to me this morning. I've reviewed them, and they appear to be in order. Letters from physicians back east, financial records, legal documents establishing guardianship." "All forged, I'd bet," Caleb said. "That's quite an accusation." Victor's voice took on an edge. "Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Mercer?" "I'm calling you something, but we can save the specifics for later." "Gentlemen," Daniels held up a hand. "Let's keep this civil. Mr. Hale has a legal claim. Mr. Mercer, you have a marriage certificate. The question is whether that marriage is valid given Miss Hale's alleged mental state at the time of the ceremony." "There's nothing alleged about it," Victor said smoothly. "Lydia has suffered from hysteria and delusions for years. She makes wild accusations, invents elaborate fantasies about being mistreated. The doctors I consulted were very clear that she requires supervision and care." "Then bring her out here," Daniel said, looking at Caleb. Let me talk to her. See for myself whether she seems competent. This was the moment. Caleb could refuse, could bar the door and make them force their way in. But that would just make him look guilty, make Lydia look like a prisoner instead of a wife. He stepped aside. She's inside. The door opened before Daniels could knock. Lydia stood in the doorway, and Caleb felt his heart break a little at the sight of her. She'd put on that mask again, the one that made her look like a china doll, fragile and empty and breakable. Her hands were folded in front of her, her eyes downcast, her whole body radiating submission. It was exactly the wrong approach, but he understood why she'd done it. This was how she'd survived Victor before, by making herself nothing, by giving him no reason to strike. "Hello, Father," her voice came out small and childlike. Victor's expression flickered with triumph. "Lydia, sweetheart, you look tired." "I'm fine." "Are you?" "Because these good men tell me you've run away." Again. He stepped closer, and Lydia flinched, just slightly, but everyone saw it. "We've talked about this, dear, about how your mind plays tricks on you, about how you need to stay where people can take care of you properly. I'm married now. Caleb takes care of me. Mr. Mercer is a stranger who took advantage of your vulnerable state." Victor's voice dripped false sympathy. "But I don't blame you, sweetheart. I know you're not well. That's why I'm here, to bring you home where you belong." Daniels was watching this exchange with increasing discomfort. "Miss Hale, Mrs. Mercer, can you tell me why you left your stepfather's home?" Lydia's mouth opened, closed, opened again, and Caleb saw it happening, saw her retreating into that place in her mind where words didn't work anymore, where fear overrode everything else. "She left because he beat her," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the moment like a blade. Victor turned to him, eyebrows raised in theatrical shock. "Excuse me? You heard me? He beat her, starved her, kept her prisoner for 5 years. That's why she ran." "These are exactly the kind of delusions I was telling you about, Sheriff." Victor shook his head sadly. "Lydia has convinced herself, and apparently her husband, of these fantasies. But I have never raised a hand to that girl. Never." "Show them," Caleb said to Lydia. "Show them your arms." Lydia went even paler. "Caleb, show them." "Mr. Mercer," Daniels said carefully, "if you're accusing Mr. Hale of assault, that's a serious charge. Do you have evidence?" "The evidence is on her skin. Bruises, scars, years of them." Victor laughed. Actually, laughed. "Bruises? Scars? The girl is clumsy, Sheriff. Always has been. She falls, she runs into things, she burns herself on the stove. I can't count the number of times I've had to bandage her up after some accident." "They're not accidents," Caleb said. "And you know this how? You've known her for what, a month? I raised her for 5 years. I think I know my own daughter better than some frontier homesteader who bought himself a wife through a newspaper advertisement." The words hit their target. Daniels looked at Caleb with new skepticism, and Caleb felt the situation slipping away from him. "Lydia," he said, turning to her, Tell them what he did." But Lydia was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face, her breath coming in short gasps. I can't do this." "Sweetheart, it's all right." Victor moved closer, reaching for her. "You're having one of your episodes. It's not your fault. Let's get you into the wagon and—" "Don't touch her." Caleb stepped between them. Victor's mask slipped for just a second. His eyes went cold and hard and his hand twitched toward his coat. "Mr. Mercer, you're interfering with a legal matter. Sheriff, are you going to allow this?" Daniels looked torn. "Mr. Mercer, I need you to step aside. If Mr. Hale has legal guardianship—" "He doesn't. She's 22. She doesn't need a guardian. According to these medical documents, she does." Daniels pulled the papers from his pocket. 3 separate physicians have declared her mentally incompetent. That gives Mr. Hale legal authority to act on her behalf. Those doctors never examined her. He paid them to write whatever he wanted. Do you have proof of that? Do you have proof they're legitimate? The standoff hung in the air like gun smoke. Then Victor made his move. Sheriff, I'm invoking my legal right as Miss Hale's guardian to reclaim her. If Mr. Mercer continues to interfere, I'll have no choice but to file charges for kidnapping and unlawful detention. Now hold on, Daniels started. The law is clear, Sheriff, or do you intend to ignore it? Victor's voice took on a warning edge. I'd hate to have to report this to the territorial judge. Questions about a lawman's competence can be problematic for one's career. It was a threat wrapped in velvet, and everyone knew it. Daniels's jaw tightened. Mrs. Mercer, I need you to answer a question honestly. Do you want to go with your stepfather? Lydia was still crying, still shaking. I don't. It's a simple question, yes or no. She's clearly distressed, Victor interjected. She doesn't know what she wants. That's precisely why she needs proper care. I wasn't asking you. Daniels kept his eyes on Lydia. Ma'am, do you want to leave with Mr. Hale? Lydia looked at Caleb, then at Victor, then at the ground. No, she whispered. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. No. Louder this time. I don't want to go with him. Victor's expression hardened. You see, Sheriff? The delusions. She doesn't understand what's best for her. She understands just fine, Caleb said. She's terrified of him. Of course she's terrified. She's having a mental episode. This is exactly why I need to take her home, where she can receive proper medical treatment. Your home is where she got those scars in the first place. Prove it. Victor's smile returned, cold and confident. Show the sheriff these alleged scars. Let him determine whether they came from abuse or simple clumsiness. All eyes turned to Lydia. She stood there trembling, her arms wrapped around herself. This was it. The moment where she could show them the truth, make them see what Victor had done. But Caleb could see her shutting down, could see the years of conditioning overriding everything else. Victor had spent 5 years teaching her that speaking up only made things worse, that no one would believe her, that she was worthless and crazy and deserved everything she got. And now, with everyone staring at her, waiting for her to prove her own victimhood, she was breaking. I fell, she said finally, so quietly they almost didn't hear it. The bruises, I fell. Victor's triumph was written all over his face. You see? Lydia, no. Caleb moved toward her. You don't have to protect him. I'm not. I'm just... She looked up at him, and her eyes were drowning. I'm tired, Caleb. I'm so tired. I know, but you can't let him win. He already won. He always wins. Ma'am. Daniel stepped forward, his voice gentler now. I can see you're upset, but if you're saying the bruises came from falling, then there's no evidence of abuse. And with these medical documents stating you're not competent to make your own decisions, those documents are lies. Caleb's control finally snapped. Can't you see that? He's manipulating all of this. The papers, the doctors, the story about debt. It's all designed to trap her. Mr. Mercer, I understand you care about your wife, but the law, damn the law is letting him drag her back into hell. That's enough. Daniel's hand moved to his gun, not drawing it, but making his position clear. You need to calm down. Or what? You'll arrest me for trying to protect my wife? If necessary, yes. The third man, the hired muscle, had climbed down from the wagon and was moving to flank Caleb. Victor stood back, watching it all unfold with barely concealed satisfaction. This was how he operated: push until people broke, then use their breaking as evidence that they were the problem. Caleb forced himself to breathe, to think. Losing his temper would just make things worse. What if she shows you the scars? He said, trying a different approach. What if she proves they're not from accidents? Then I'd have questions for Mr. Hale, Daniel said. But she's already said she's scared. She's been conditioned to protect him because that's how she survived. But the scars are real, and they tell a story. Victor stepped in smoothly. Sheriff, this is getting absurd. The girl has admitted the bruises are from clumsiness. Mr. Mercer is trying to manufacture a crime where none exists. I'm trying to save her life. How dramatic. Victor turned to Lydia. Sweetheart, why don't you settle this? Show the sheriff your arms. Let him see these so-called scars. Then we can all stop this nonsense and get you home where you belong. It was a calculated move. Victor knew that even if Lydia showed them, he could explain it away. Accidents, clumsiness, self-harm during her episodes. He'd already laid the groundwork for every possible defense. Lydia looked at Caleb, then at Victor, then at her own hands, still wrapped around her middle. I can't, she said. Can't or won't? Daniels asked. Does it matter? It does when I'm trying to determine the truth. The truth? Lydia's laugh was broken glass. The truth is that I'm standing here trying to decide whether showing you my scars will save me or just give him another excuse to say I'm crazy. The truth is that no matter what I do, you're going to take his side because he has papers and money and respectability. The truth is that I ran across half the country to get away from him, and he still found me. The truth is, her voice cracked. The truth is that I'm going to lose no matter what I do. The defeat in her voice cut deeper than any blade. Caleb wanted to fix it, wanted to say something that would make her see she still had fight left in her. But before he could speak, Victor made his move. Sheriff, I think we've wasted enough time here. Miss Hale is clearly unwell. I'm exercising my legal right as her guardian to take her into my care. If Mr. Mercer continues to interfere, I'll press charges. Now hold on, Caleb started. Mr. Mercer. Daniel's voice was firm. Unless you can provide concrete evidence of abuse, and I mean concrete, not just accusations, then my hands are tied. Mr. Hale has legal documents establishing guardianship. You have a marriage certificate that may not be valid if his ward was incompetent at the time of signing. So that's it? You're just going to let him take her? I'm going to follow the law. If you believe Mr. Hale is lying, you can file a complaint with the territorial court. Get a judge to review the guardianship papers. But that takes time, and right now the law is on his side. Victor smiled. Lydia, get your things. We're leaving. No. The word came out of Lydia's mouth like a gunshot. No, I'm not going. Sweetheart, you don't have a choice. There's always a choice. She lifted her chin and something in her eyes had changed. You taught me that. Every time you hit me and I didn't fight back. Every time you told me I was worthless and I believed you. Every time you made me think I deserved it. Those were all choices I made. Wrong choices, maybe. But mine. Lydia, I'm not finished. Her voice was shaking but getting stronger. I chose to run. I chose to answer Caleb's advertisement. I chose to come here and try to build something new, and now I'm choosing to stay. You're not competent to make that choice. Then I guess you'll have to drag me out of here by force, in front of the sheriff, in front of my husband, in front of witnesses. She spread her arms wide. Go ahead. Show them who you really are. The air went electric. Victor's mask was slipping. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and for just a second everyone could see the violence lurking beneath his civilized veneer. You ungrateful little... He caught himself, smoothed his expression back into concerned paternity. Sheriff, she's having an episode. She needs to be restrained for her own safety. She doesn't look like she's having an episode, Daniel said slowly. She looks like she's making a choice. A choice she's not legally permitted to make. Maybe, maybe not. Daniels was studying Lydia now with new attention. Ma'am, are you saying you want to stay with your husband? Yes. Even though your stepfather has legal guardianship papers? Those papers are based on lies. Can you prove that? Lydia hesitated. Then slowly she began unbuttoning her sleeve. Lydia, you don't have to, Caleb started. Yes, I do. She pushed the fabric up past her elbow, revealing the faded bruises Caleb had seen weeks ago, and above them, white scars. Dozens of them. Some thin and precise, others ragged and deep. These aren't from falling, she said quietly. These are from cigarettes, from belt buckles, from whatever was close enough for him to grab when he was angry. Daniel stepped closer, his expression hardening. Mr. Hale, you want to explain this? She's lying. Those could be from anything. Self-harm, accidents. They're in patterns. Lydia rolled up her other sleeve. More scars, more bruises. You can't get patterns like this from accidents. She's troubled. She hurts herself to get attention. I've had to stop her multiple times. Then why didn't you mention that before? Caleb cut in. You said she was clumsy. You said she had accidents. You didn't say anything about self-harm until she showed proof you couldn't explain away. Victor's composure was cracking. Sheriff, this is absurd. You can't seriously be considering the word of a mentally incompetent woman over documented medical evidence. I'm considering the fact that those scars look like abuse, Daniel said flatly. And I'm considering the fact that your story keeps changing. And I'm considering that maybe those medical documents need to be verified before I help you take a woman who clearly doesn't want to go. You don't have the authority to question legal documents. Actually, I do. It's called reasonable suspicion. Daniels turned to Lydia. Ma'am, do you feel safe with your stepfather? No. Do you want to go with him? No. That's enough for me. He looked at Victor. Mr. Hale, I'm going to need you to leave. If you want to pursue this legally, you can file with the territorial court, but I'm not helping you forcibly remove a woman who's showing signs of abuse and saying she doesn't want to leave. Victor's face went red. This is outrageous. I have legal rights. And she has the right not to be beaten. Now get off this property before I arrest you for disturbing the peace. You'll regret this, Sheriff. I have connections. I'll have your job. I've been threatened by better men than you. Now move. For a long moment, Victor didn't budge. His eyes locked on Lydia with such pure hatred that Caleb's hand moved to his gun. Then Victor smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Caleb had ever seen. Enjoy your little victory, sweetheart, he said softly. But this isn't over. It'll never be over. I'll be back. And next time, there won't be a sheriff around to protect you. Mr. Hale. Daniel's voice was ice. Leave. Now. Victor climbed back onto his horse with exaggerated dignity. The hired muscle followed suit, and the wagon turned around with agonizing slowness. They watched until the dust settled and the wagon disappeared over the horizon. Only then did Lydia's knees buckle. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, and she clung to him like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. I did it, she whispered. I actually did it. You did. He held her tight, feeling her shake against him. You stood up to him. He's going to come back. Maybe. He meant it, about it not being over. I know. She pulled back enough to look at him, and her eyes were red but clear. I'm scared. Me too. But I'm not sorry. Even if he comes back. Even if this gets worse. I'm not sorry I stayed. Daniels cleared his throat awkwardly. Mrs. Mercer, I need to ask you some questions for my report. Now? Caleb said. While it's fresh, and while I can document those injuries properly. Lydia nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, I'll tell you everything. They spent the next hour on the porch while Lydia recounted 5 years of hell. Every beating, every threat, every moment of terror that Victor had carved into her soul. She spoke in a flat, detached voice, like she was reading from a ledger instead of describing her own suffering. Daniels wrote it all down, his expression growing grimmer with each page. When she finished, he sat back and let out a long breath. Mrs. Mercer, I'm going to be honest with you. This is bad, but it's also going to be hard to prosecute. You're in Kansas now. He's back east. Getting him extradited for crimes committed years ago in another jurisdiction, that's complicated. So he gets away with it. I didn't say that. I said it's complicated. Daniels folded his notes carefully. But here's what I can do. I can file a report. Document your testimony. Note the physical evidence. And if he shows up here again making trouble, I'll arrest him for harassment and threatening behavior. That much is in my jurisdiction. And if he brings a judge or a marshal, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, legally, you're married to Mr. Mercer. That marriage is valid unless a court says otherwise. And I'll testify that you showed no signs of mental incompetence when I interviewed you today. It wasn't much, but it was something. After Daniels left, Caleb and Lydia sat on the porch in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. What do we do now? Lydia finally asked. I don't know. He'll come back. You know he will. Probably. And next time he won't bring the sheriff. He'll bring men who don't care about the law. Caleb looked at her. You think he'll try to take you by force? I think he's a man who doesn't accept losing, and I just humiliated him in front of witnesses. She pulled her knees up to her chest. He's going to make me pay for that. Then we'll be ready. How? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. They sat there until full dark, neither of them willing to go inside and pretend this day hadn't happened. Finally, Lydia stood. I should make supper. You don't have to. I want to. I want to do something normal, something that doesn't involve Victor or fear or any of this. She looked down at him. Is that all right? More than all right. She went inside and Caleb stayed on the porch, thinking about threats and violence and how far a man would go to protect something he'd started to care about. He'd never killed anyone, never even come close. But sitting there in the dark, listening to Lydia moving around in the kitchen, he knew with absolute certainty that if Victor Hale came back trying to take her, one of them wasn't going to walk away. And Caleb was fine with that. 3 days passed in tense silence. Caleb spent most of his time outside, working the fence line, checking the horses, finding reasons to stay within sight of the house. He kept his rifle close, and his attention split between work and watching the horizon for dust clouds that might signal trouble coming. Lydia stayed busy too, but differently than before. She wasn't trying to prove herself useful anymore. She was preparing. She cleaned both rifles, organized ammunition, memorized sight lines from every window. She moved through the house like someone planning a defense, and maybe that's exactly what she was doing. They didn't talk about Victor, didn't need to. The threat hung over them like weather about to break. On the fourth morning, Caleb woke to find Lydia already up, standing by the kitchen window with a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She'd pulled her hair back in a practical braid instead of the tight, painful bun she usually wore. Small change, but he noticed. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not really." She didn't turn around. "Kept thinking I heard horses. I checked an hour ago. Nothing out there but coyotes." This time, Caleb poured himself coffee, joined her at the window. The sun was just starting to paint the horizon pink and gold. Beautiful morning. Wrong kind of peaceful. "He's going to wait," Lydia said quietly. "Let us think maybe he gave up. Let us relax our guard. Then he'll come." "You sound pretty certain." "I know how he thinks. He's patient when he needs to be, and he likes it when people think they're safe. Makes the trap that much more satisfying." "Then we don't relax." She finally looked at him. "For how long? A week? A month? Forever? We can't live like this, Caleb, always waiting, always afraid." "What's the alternative?" "I don't know." She set down her cup with more force than necessary. "Leave, maybe. Go somewhere he can't find us." "Where? He found us here. He'll find us anywhere." "Then what? We just wait for him to show up and—" She stopped herself, but they both knew how that sentence ended. Caleb set his own cup down carefully. "Can I tell you something?" "What?" "I've been thinking about this. About him. About what happens if he comes back." "And?" "And I think maybe we're looking at it wrong." Lydia turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "We're acting like he holds all the cards, like he gets to decide when and how this ends, but he doesn't. We do. Caleb, he has money, connections, the law on his side. He has what he had back east. Out here, he's just another man." Caleb met her eyes. "And men can be stopped." The implication hung in the air between them. "You're talking about killing him," Lydia said flatly. "I'm talking about being ready for whatever comes. If he shows up here with hired guns, if he tries to take you by force, then what, you shoot him? Get yourself hanged for murder? Better than letting him drag you back." "No." She shook her head hard. "No, you don't get to throw your life away for me. We're not doing that." "Lydia, I mean it, Caleb. I won't be responsible for you ending up dead or in prison. I've had enough blood on my conscience." "What blood?" She looked away. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." "Lydia, I said forget it." But Caleb didn't forget it. He filed it away with all the other pieces of her past that she'd let slip, fragments of a story he was still trying to understand. They worked through the morning in uncomfortable silence. Caleb fixed a broken section of the barn wall. Lydia tended the garden, pulling weeds with more violence than necessary. Around noon, they heard a rider coming. Both of them grabbed rifles. But it was just Bill Hutchins from town, his old mule plodding along at its usual glacial pace. Bill was a talker, a gossip, generally harmless but prone to showing up at inconvenient times with news that was either useless or 3 days old. "Mercer," he called out as he approached. "Glad I caught you home." Caleb lowered his rifle but kept it close. "Bill, what brings you out?" "Wanted to give you a heads up. That fancy fellow who was asking after your wife, he's still in town." Lydia had come out of the garden, dirt on her hands and fear in her eyes. "Still there?" "Been at the hotel for 4 days now. Mostly keeps to himself, but he's been asking questions. Lots of questions. About you two, about your land, about whether you have neighbors close by." "What kind of questions?" Caleb asked. The kind that make folks nervous. How isolated this place is, whether you have help, whether anyone would notice if something happened out here. Bill shifted in his saddle. Sheriff told him to mind his business, but you know how that goes. Man with money can usually find someone willing to talk. Anyone take him up on it? Don't think so. Most folks know better than to get involved in family disputes, but I thought you should know he's still circling. Bill looked at Lydia with genuine concern. Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, that stepfather of yours has a mean look about him, the kind that smiles while he's planning something ugly. I know, Lydia said quietly. I know exactly what he looks like. After Bill left, with a promise to keep them informed if anything changed, Caleb and Lydia stood in the yard, the weight of the news settling on them like dust. 4 days, Lydia said. He's been there 4 days and hasn't made a move. Like you said, he's waiting. For what? For us to let our guard down, or for Sheriff Daniels to leave town, or for the right moment when no one's paying attention. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself despite the heat. I hate this. I hate knowing he's out there, planning. I hate feeling like a rabbit waiting for the hawk. Then maybe we stop waiting. What? Caleb looked at her. You said it yourself. We can't live like this forever. So maybe we go to him. End it on our terms instead of his. Go to him how? I don't know yet, but sitting here waiting to be attacked feels like the wrong move. And riding into town where he's surrounded by potential witnesses and possible allies feels like the right move? When you put it that way. There is no good move, Caleb. That's what you're not getting. He's set this up so that anything we do plays into his hands. We wait, he comes here. We go there. He springs whatever trap he's already set. We run, he follows. We fight, we end up dead or in prison. So what do you suggest? I don't know, her voice cracked. I don't have an answer. I spent 5 years trying to outsmart him, and it never worked. Every time I thought I had a plan, he was 3 steps ahead. Every time I thought I'd found a way out, he blocked it. That's what he does. That's what he's good at. Caleb stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. He's good at controlling someone who's alone and scared, but you're not alone anymore. That just means he'll hurt both of us instead of just me. Maybe. Or maybe 2 people are harder to trap than 1. She looked up at him, and he could see her wanting to believe it, wanting to think that somehow this time would be different. But hope was a dangerous thing when you'd had it beaten out of you repeatedly. I need to think, she said. I need some space. She walked away before he could respond, heading toward the creek that ran along the north property line. Caleb watched her go, fighting the urge to follow. She needed room to breathe, to process. He understood that. What he didn't understand was how to protect someone who'd spent 5 years learning that protection was a lie. That night, Lydia didn't come back to the house until after dark. Caleb had started to worry around sunset, but he'd held himself back from going after her. She was armed. She knew the property. She needed time alone. He repeated these things like a prayer while he paced the porch and watched the darkness deepen. When she finally appeared, walking out of the shadows like a ghost, his relief was sharp enough to hurt. I'm sorry, she said before he could speak. I didn't mean to worry you. You didn't? He stopped himself. Yes, you did. But that's all right. Are you okay? No, but I'm better than I was this morning. She came up the porch steps, sat down on the bench he'd built last spring. I did a lot of thinking. And you're right, we can't keep living like this. But you're also wrong about going to him. That's what he expects, what he wants. Caleb sat down beside her, close enough to talk quietly, but far enough to give her space. So what do? We make him come here, but on our terms. When we're ready. When we have the advantage. How do we do that? We bait him. She turned to look at him, and there was something new in her eyes, something hard and calculating. We let him think he's won, that we're scared and desperate. Then when he shows up expecting easy prey, we show him what a mistake that was. Lydia, that sounds like a trap. Yes, exactly like a trap. Her smile was cold. He taught me well. Time to use those lessons against him. Caleb studied her face in the dim light from the house. What happened to not wanting me to throw my life away? I still don't, but I'm done being a victim. And if he's coming anyway, and we both know he is, Then I'd rather face him when I'm ready than when he catches me off guard. This is dangerous. Living is dangerous. At least this way we get to choose how it happens. There was logic in that, twisted as it was, and Caleb had to admit that the idea of waiting passively for Victor to make his move had been eating at him too. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's say we do this. What's the plan?" They talked through the night, building a strategy from pieces of anger and desperation and frontier pragmatism. It wasn't a good plan. There were a dozen ways it could go wrong, but it was a plan, and that was more than they'd had before. The next morning, Caleb rode into town alone. He found Victor at the hotel, sitting in the lobby with a newspaper he wasn't reading. The man looked up when Caleb entered, and his smile was all poison. "Mr. Mercer, what a pleasant surprise. Cut the shit, Victor. You know why I'm here." "Do I?" Victor folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. "Enlighten me. You want Lydia. I can't stop you from wanting her, but I can make you a deal." Interest flickered in Victor's eyes. "I'm listening. She'll see you, talk to you, give you a chance to say whatever it is you came here to say, but on neutral ground. With a witness." "What kind of witness?" "Sheriff Daniels, tomorrow afternoon, at the ranch." Victor laughed. "You want me to walk into your territory with the sheriff present? How stupid do you think I am?" "I think you're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when you see one. This is your chance to talk to Lydia without anyone accusing you of kidnapping or force, to make your case in front of a lawman who can verify that everything was done properly." "And why would Lydia suddenly agree to this?" "Because I asked her to. Because she's tired of running. Because maybe, somewhere under all that fear, there's a part of her that wants to hear you out." Caleb kept his voice level, reasonable. "Or maybe she just wants closure." "Closure," Victor tasted the word. "Interesting choice." "Tomorrow, 2:00. Daniels will be there to make sure everything stays civil." "And if I refuse?" "Then you keep waiting out here, spending money on a hotel room, making enemies with the locals. Eventually you'll run out of patience or funds and you'll try something stupid. And when you do, I'll be ready." Caleb leaned in slightly. "But this way, you get what you want. A conversation with your stepdaughter, witnessed and legal." Victor studied him for a long moment. "What's your angle here, Mercer?" "No angle. Just a husband trying to give his wife some peace." "Bullshit. You're planning something." "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. But you're still going to come tomorrow because you can't resist. Because the chance to talk to Lydia, to try to manipulate her one more time, to prove you still have power over her, that's too tempting to pass up." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You think you know me. I know men like you. I've met them before. You're not as unique as you think. And you're not as clever as you think." But Victor stood up, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "Fine. Tomorrow. 2:00. But if this is some kind of ambush, it's not an ambush. It's a conversation. That's all. We'll see." Caleb left before Victor could change his mind, his heart hammering against his ribs. First part done. Now they just had to prepare for the second part, the hard part. He stopped by the sheriff's office on his way out of town. Daniels was cleaning his rifle, a task that seemed to occupy half his working hours. He looked up when Caleb entered, and his expression wasn't exactly welcoming. "Mercer, what now?" "Need a favor." "That seems to be going around lately." "Victor Hale. He's still in town." "I'm aware." "Been keeping an eye on him." Daniels set down his cleaning rag. "He filed a formal complaint yesterday. Claims you're holding his stepdaughter against her will." "That's bullshit." "I know it's bullshit. I told him it's bullshit, but he's persistent." Daniels leaned back in his chair. "What's this favor?" "I want you to come out to the ranch tomorrow, 2:00, as a witness." "A witness to what?" "To a conversation between Victor and Lydia. I told him she'd agree to talk to him if there was a lawman present to keep things civil." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Why do I feel like I'm being pulled into something complicated?" "Because you are. But it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "Victor getting impatient and trying to take her by force. Then someone ends up dead, and you have to investigate a murder instead of just refereeing a conversation." "You make a compelling argument." Daniel sighed. "All right. I'll be there. But Mercer, If this goes sideways, it won't. You can't promise that. No. But I can promise I'm trying to handle this the right way, the legal way. Daniels looked at him for a long moment. The legal way doesn't always work out here. You know that, right? Yeah, but it's still worth trying. You're either very principled or very naive. Maybe both. Caleb rode home with the setting sun at his back, rehearsing tomorrow's plan in his mind and finding new flaws with each repetition. But it was too late to back out now. Victor was coming. Daniels would be there. And Lydia would have to face the monster she'd spent 5 years running from. He just hoped they were all ready for what came next. Lydia was waiting on the porch when he got back. Did he agree? He agreed. And the sheriff? He'll be here at 2. She nodded slowly, her hands gripping the porch rail tight enough to make her knuckles white. Then I guess this is really happening. It's not too late to change your mind. Yes, it is. It was too late the moment he showed up in Kansas. She turned to face him. I need you to teach me something. What? How to kill someone. Caleb felt his stomach drop. Lydia, I'm serious. If this goes bad tomorrow, if he tries something, I need to know how to end it. Quickly, without hesitation. You already know how to shoot. I know how to hit a target. That's not the same thing as shooting a person. Her eyes were hard. I need to know what it feels like to aim at someone with the intention of killing them. I need to practice that. So when the moment comes, if the moment comes, I don't freeze. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about survival. That's what all murderers say. She flinched but held her ground. Maybe. But I'm done being the victim in this story. If Victor pushes this to violence, I'm going to push back. And I need to know I can do it without hesitating. Caleb wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her that killing someone changed you in ways you couldn't undo, that the weight of it never really left. But looking at her face, at the determination mixed with terror, he realized she already knew that, and she was willing to pay that price. All right, he said quietly, but not tonight, tomorrow morning, before everyone arrives. Why not tonight? Because you need sleep, and because I need to think about how to teach someone to become a killer without destroying what's left of their humanity. Lydia's expression softened slightly. You think I have any humanity left to destroy? I think you have more than you give yourself credit for, and I think that's worth protecting, even from yourself. Caleb, tomorrow morning, I promise. But tonight, we rest, because tomorrow's going to be hard enough without being exhausted. She didn't look happy about it, but she nodded. They made a simple supper, beans and cornbread, nothing fancy, and ate in silence. Afterward, Lydia disappeared into the bedroom earlier than usual. Caleb stayed by the fire, cleaning weapons and trying not to think about all the ways tomorrow could end badly. Around midnight, he heard her door open. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the lamp she'd left burning. I can't sleep. Me neither. Can I ask you something? Sure. If it comes down to it tomorrow, if it's him or me, will you hesitate? The question hung in the air like smoke. No, Caleb said finally. I won't. Even if it means going to prison, hanging, even then. She crossed the room, sat down on the floor next to his chair like she had that other night. Why? Because some things are worth the price, and keeping you safe is one of them. That's stupid. Probably. I'm not worth that much, Caleb. I'm broken, damaged. I'll probably never be a real wife to you. I'll probably never be able to give you the things a man deserves. Stop. He reached down, took her hand. You're worth more than you think. And those things a man deserves? I don't give a damn about them. What I care about is sitting right here. Lydia looked up at him, tears sliding down her face. I don't know how to believe that. Then I'll keep saying it until you do. She squeezed his hand, held on like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. They sat like that for a long time, neither of them speaking, both of them knowing that tomorrow everything might change. Eventually Lydia stood. Thank you. For what? For being you, for not being him. That's a pretty low bar. You'd be surprised how few people clear it. She went back to the bedroom, and this time Caleb heard her crying through the thin walls. He wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, But he'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was give someone space to grieve. So he sat by the dying fire and listened to her cry, and promised himself that tomorrow, no matter what happened, Victor Hale would learn that hurting Lydia came with consequences. The sun rose red the next morning, painting the sky in shades of blood and warning. Caleb was already up, checking ammunition and running through plans he knew were probably useless. No plan survived contact with reality, especially when reality included a man like Victor. Lydia emerged just after dawn, already dressed, her hair braided tight. She looked like she'd slept about as well as he had, which was to say, not at all. "Ready for that lesson?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." They went out to the corral with a rifle and Caleb's old pistol. He set up targets, empty bottles, a bucket, a piece of board with a rough human silhouette drawn in charcoal. "Shooting a person isn't like shooting a target," he said. "Targets don't move. They don't beg. They don't look at you with eyes that ask why you're doing this. Victor won't beg. Maybe not. But he might talk. Might try to manipulate you even with a gun pointed at him. You need to be ready for that." "How do I get ready for that?" "By deciding right now, before it happens, what your line is. The point where talking stops and action starts." He handed her the pistol. "You need to know exactly what he'd have to do or say to make you pull that trigger, because in the moment, you won't have time to think." Lydia took the gun, her hand steady. "If he tries to take me, that's the line." "Physically take you? Or legally, if he somehow gets the sheriff to side with him, if he produces some paper that says I have to go?" She met Caleb's eyes. "I'm not going back alive. It won't come to that. But if it does, then we both know where the line is." They practiced for an hour, not just shooting, but shooting quickly. Shooting while moving, shooting at the human-shaped target, and forcing herself to see it as Victor instead of wood and charcoal. By the time they finished, Lydia was sweating and pale, but her hands were steady. "I can do this," she said, more to herself than to him. "If I have to, I can do this." "I know." They went back to the house to clean up and prepare. 1 o'clock came and went, then 1:30. At 1:45, they saw the dust cloud. 3 riders. Sheriff Daniels in the lead, Victor beside him on that same expensive horse, and bringing up the rear was the hired muscle from before, thick-necked and mean-looking. "He brought backup," Lydia said quietly. "So did we." Caleb nodded toward the rifle leaning against the wall near the door. "Daniels is the law. That counts for something." "Does it? Or is he just here to witness Victor dragging me away?" "Have a little faith. Faith got beaten out of me a long time ago." The riders pulled up in front of the house. Daniels dismounted first, his expression carefully neutral. Victor followed, moving with that same theatrical precision. The hired man stayed on his horse, watching everything with dead eyes. "Mrs. Mercer," Daniels said with a nod. "Mr. Mercer. Mr. Hale here says you've agreed to a conversation." "That's right," Caleb said. Victor stepped forward, his smile wide and false. "Lydia, sweetheart, I'm so glad you've finally come to your senses." "I haven't come to anything," Lydia said, her voice cold. "I'm here because Caleb asked me to hear you out, so talk." "Can we do this inside, in private?" "No," Caleb and Lydia said simultaneously. "Out here is fine," Daniels added. "Where everyone can see and hear, keeps things honest." Victor's smile tightened. "Of course, honesty, always important." He turned his full attention to Lydia, and Caleb saw her spine stiffen. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, sweetheart. A lot of expense and worry. I came all this way because I care about you, because you're family." "Family?" Lydia's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you call it? What would you call it? Prison? Torture? Hell?" Those are very dramatic words for a girl who lived in comfort, who had food and shelter and everything she needed. Everything except freedom. Everything except safety. Everything except the right to exist without fear. Victor's expression flickered. "You were always prone to exaggeration. Was I exaggerating when you put out cigarettes on my arms? When you locked me in the cellar for 2 days without food? When you told me I was worthless and should have died with my mother? You were difficult. You needed discipline. I needed not to be beaten for existing." "Lydia, calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." Her voice rose, breaking. You spent 5 years making me feel like I was crazy for being afraid, like I deserved everything you did. And now you stand here in front of witnesses and call it discipline? Victor looked at Sheriff Daniels. You see? The hysteria. The wild accusations. This is exactly what the doctors warned about. But Daniels wasn't looking convinced anymore. Mr. Hale, I've heard about your discipline. I've seen the scars. And I'm starting to think maybe those doctors never actually examined your stepdaughter. Of course they did. I have the papers. Papers can be forged or bought. And you strike me as a man with money and few scruples. Victor's mask was slipping. The concerned father act was cracking around the edges, revealing something uglier underneath. Sheriff, I came here in good faith. No, you didn't. Lydia stepped forward. You came here expecting to manipulate everyone into giving you what you want. That's what you do. That's all you've ever done. And what is it you think I want? Control, power, the satisfaction of dragging me back under your thumb. She moved closer, and Caleb tensed, ready to intervene if needed. But I'm not going back, not willingly, not legally, not ever. You don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. I'm choosing to stay here, with my husband, on my land, and there's nothing you can do about it. Victor's composure finally shattered. Nothing. His voice went low and dangerous. You stupid girl. You think marrying some dirt farmer makes you safe? You think a sheriff who won't even be here next week can protect you? I own people in this territory, judges, marshals, men who'll sign whatever papers I need to have you declared incompetent and dragged back to where you belong. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Hale, Daniels said quietly. It's a promise, Sheriff, and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop me. Actually, there is. I can arrest you for making terroristic threats. Victor laughed. On what grounds? Everything I said was within my legal rights as her guardian. Except she's not your ward. She's a married woman. That marriage supersedes any guardianship claim you might have. Not if the marriage is invalid, not if she was mentally incompetent when she signed the papers. Were you incompetent, Mrs. Mercer? Daniels asked Lydia. No. Did anyone force you to marry Mr. Mercer? No. Did you understand what you were doing when you took your vows? Yes. I understood I was choosing freedom over slavery. I understood I was choosing a man who treats me like a person instead of property. I understood exactly what I was doing. Her voice rang out clear and strong, and Caleb felt something in his chest expand with pride. But Victor wasn't done. This is absurd. Sheriff, I'm ordering you to... You don't order me to do anything. I don't work for you. You will if you want to keep your job. I told you, I have connections. One telegram to the territorial governor, and you'll be looking for new employment. Then send your telegram, but right now, you're going to leave this property. I'm not leaving without my daughter. She's not your daughter, and she's not going anywhere. Victor's hand moved toward his coat. Everything happened fast after that. Caleb's hand went to his gun. Lydia stepped back. The hired muscle started to dismount, and Daniels drew his pistol with the speed of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Don't, Daniels said quietly. Whatever you're reaching for, leave it where it is. Victor froze, his hand halfway to his inside pocket. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victor slowly withdrew his hand, holding it up to show it was empty. I was just getting my papers, he said. Papers don't require that kind of reach. You've got a weapon in there. For protection. You won't need protection if you leave peacefully. Victor's eyes swept across all of them. Daniels with his gun drawn, Caleb poised to draw his, Lydia standing her ground despite the fear written all over her face. This isn't over, Victor said. Yeah, it is, Daniels replied. You're done here. Get on your horse and ride back to town. And tomorrow morning you're getting on a train and heading back east. Because if I see you anywhere near this ranch again, I will arrest you. And I'll make sure every lawman between here and the Mississippi knows your name and what you tried to do here. You're making a mistake, Sheriff. Maybe. But it's mine to make. Now move. Victor mounted his horse with exaggerated dignity, but his hands were shaking. The hired muscle followed suit, looking confused about whether to fight or flee. As they turned to leave, Victor looked back at Lydia one last time. You'll regret this, he said, when he gets tired of you. When you realize you traded one prison for another. You'll wish you'd come back with me. No, Lydia said clearly. I won't. They watched the three men ride away, dust rising in their wake. Only when they were out of sight did Lydia's knees buckle. Caleb caught her before she fell, and she clung to him like a drowning woman grabbing driftwood. "It's over," he said. "He's gone." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true, because men like Victor didn't give up that easily, and tomorrow was going to bring a whole new kind of trouble. Sheriff Daniels stayed another 20 minutes, making sure they were all right, reminding them to keep their doors locked and their guns loaded. He promised to keep an eye on Victor in town to make sure the man actually got on that eastbound train in the morning. But after he left, the silence that settled over the ranch felt wrong, too heavy, too still. Lydia stood in the middle of the yard staring at the dust cloud that had long since settled. She hadn't moved since Daniels rode off. "You should come inside," Caleb said gently. "He's coming back." Daniels said, "I don't care what Daniels said. Victor's coming back." She turned to face him, and her eyes were hollow. "Tonight. Maybe tomorrow night. But soon. He won't leave without making me pay for humiliating him." "Then we'll be ready." "Will we? He's got that hired gun. Probably has more where that came from. And we're just two people on an isolated ranch that nobody will check on until it's too late." Caleb wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. Victor had money and connections, and the kind of rage that didn't cool with time or distance. Men like that didn't accept defeat. They just regrouped and came back harder. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know. Run, maybe. Get as far from here as we can before he—" "No more running. Caleb, I mean it, Lydia. You've been running your whole life from him, from fear, from the possibility that maybe you deserve better than what he gave you, and I'm done watching you run. Then what? We just wait here for him to show up with guns, and we prepare. We fortify. We make this place into somewhere he can't just walk into and take what he wants." Caleb started toward the barn. "Come on, we've got work to do." They spent the rest of the afternoon turning the ranch into something resembling a fortress. Caleb nailed boards across the lower windows, reinforced the door with extra timber, moved furniture to create cover positions. Lydia organized ammunition, filled buckets with water in case of fire, dragged supplies into the house so they could withstand a siege if necessary. It was brutal work in the afternoon heat, but neither of them complained. Physical labor was better than sitting around waiting for disaster. As the sun started to set, they took stock of their preparations. "It's not much," Caleb said, looking at their handiwork. "It's more than I've ever had before." Lydia checked the rifle for the third time, making sure it was loaded and ready. "At least this time I can fight back." "You've always been able to fight back. You just needed to believe it. Easy to say when you weren't beaten every time you tried." "You're right. I'm sorry." She looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For making it sound simple. For not understanding how hard this is." He set down the hammer he'd been holding. "I've never been where you are. Never had to fight just to exist. So I don't get to tell you how you should feel about any of this." Lydia was quiet for a moment. Then she crossed the room and took his hand. "You've done more for me than anyone ever has. Just by treating me like I matter. By believing me when I told you what he did. By standing between me and him, even when it would have been easier to just let him take me." Her grip tightened. "So don't apologize for not understanding. Understand enough." They stood there holding hands while the last light drained from the sky, both of them knowing that tonight would bring something final. One way or another, this would end. Caleb made them eat supper even though neither had much appetite. Beans again, with cornbread that Lydia had gotten better at making. They chewed mechanically, forcing fuel into bodies that would need it later. "Tell me about after," Lydia said suddenly. "After what?" "After tonight, assuming we survive. What comes next?" Caleb set down his fork. "I hadn't thought that far." "Liar. You're always thinking ahead. It's one of the things I've noticed about you. You plan for problems before they happen." "All right, fine." He leaned back in his chair. "After tonight, assuming Victor's gone for good, we rebuild. Fix the fence properly, expand the garden, maybe get some chickens. Normal things." "Normal." She tasted the word like it was foreign. "I don't know if I remember what normal feels like." "Then we'll figure it out together." "What if I can't? What if I'm too broken to ever be normal?" "Then we'll be broken together. I'm not exactly whole myself. You lost your wife. That's different than—" "Different, not less. We both got pieces missing, but maybe that's okay. Maybe two people with holes in them can still build something solid. Lydia smiled, small and sad. That's either very wise or very naive. Probably both. They cleaned up the dishes in silence. As Lydia was putting away the last plate, she paused. Did you hear that? Caleb went still, listening. At first there was nothing but the usual night sounds, crickets, a distant coyote, the wind moving through the grass. Then he heard it too. Horses. Multiple horses. Moving quietly, but not quietly enough. Blow out the lamp, he said softly. Lydia extinguished the flame, plunging the room into darkness. Caleb moved to the window, peering through the gap between boards. 3 riders. Maybe 4. Hard to tell in the darkness. They'd stopped about 50 yards out, just beyond easy rifle range, like they were studying the house and planning their approach. It's him, Lydia whispered. Stay low, away from the windows. What are they doing? Deciding how to come at us, probably. As if in answer, one of the riders moved forward. In the moonlight, Caleb could make out Victor's expensive coat and that same theatrical posture even on horseback. Lydia! Victor's voice carried across the distance. I know you can hear me. Caleb put a hand on Lydia's arm as she started to move. Don't respond. I'm not going away, sweetheart. Not until we settle this properly. Silence from the house. You've got 2 choices, Victor continued. You can come out now, voluntarily, and we can end this without anyone getting hurt. Or I can come in there and drag you out, and people will get hurt. Probably your husband, probably you. It doesn't have to be that way. He's lying, Lydia breathed. Even if I went out there, he'd kill us both. I know. So what do we do? Before Caleb could answer, one of the other riders moved. He had something in his hand, a bottle with a rag stuffed in the top. As they watched, he struck a match. Molotov cocktail, Caleb said. They're going to try to burn us out. Can they? Maybe. The house is wood, dry wood. He grabbed his rifle. When they throw it, I'm going to shoot. You cover the back in case someone tries to come through there. Lydia nodded and moved toward the rear of the house, her rifle held ready. The rider with the bottle lit the rag. Flame burst to life, orange and hungry. He pulled back his arm to throw. Caleb fired. The shot echoed across the prairie like thunder. The rider jerked and dropped the bottle, which shattered on the ground near his horse. Flames spread across the grass, small but bright. The horses spooked. The rider scattered, pulling back to regroup. Warning shot, Caleb called out. Next one won't be. You can't hold out forever, Mercer, Victor shouted from somewhere in the darkness. You're outnumbered, outgunned. This is your last chance. Then I guess we're doing this the hard way. Caleb fired again, aiming high but close enough to make his point. More shots answered. Bullets thudded into the boards covering the windows, into the door frame, into the walls. The hired guns were shooting blind, trying to find openings that didn't exist. Caleb ducked low, waited for the volley to end, then returned fire. He didn't know if he hit anything, but he heard cursing and the sound of someone scrambling for cover. This went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Bursts of gunfire, followed by tense silence. Attempts to get closer, followed by rifle shots that drove them back. The acrid smell of gun smoke mixed with the smell of fear sweat and the metallic tang of adrenaline. They're trying to flank us, Lydia called from the back. 2 riders moving around to the east side. Caleb moved to join her, peering through a gap in the boards. She was right. 2 shapes were circling wide, trying to come at the house from an angle they wouldn't be expecting. Can you shoot them from here? He asked. Not clearly. The barn's in the way. Then we wait until they commit. Let them think they've found a weakness. They crouched in the darkness, weapons ready, listening to the footsteps getting closer. The riders had dismounted and were approaching on foot now, trying to stay quiet. The back door rattled as someone tested it. On 3, Caleb whispered. 1, 2, 3. He yanked the door open. Lydia fired. The man on the other side, the thick-necked hired muscle from before, staggered back with a scream, clutching his shoulder. His partner grabbed him, and they both retreated into the darkness. I hit him, Lydia said, her voice shaking. I actually hit him. You did good. I shot a person, Caleb. You defended yourself. There's a difference. He pulled the door shut and braced it again. Are you okay? No, but I'll deal with it later. More gunfire from the front. Caleb rushed back to find that someone had tried to rush the door while he was distracted. They'd gotten close, maybe 10 feet, before he drove them back with rapid fire. This couldn't continue. They had enough ammunition to hold out for a while, but eventually they'd run dry. Or someone would get lucky with a shot. Or the house would catch fire despite their preparations. They needed to end this, now. "I'm going out there," Caleb said. "What? No, that's insane." "It's not about insanity, it's about math. They've got us pinned down. Eventually they'll win through attrition, but if I can get outside, flank them, take out a couple of them, you'll get yourself killed. Maybe, or maybe I'll even the odds enough that we can survive this." "Caleb, please, stay here. Keep shooting if you see targets. Don't let them know I've left." He grabbed extra ammunition, checked his pistol. "If I don't come back, don't say that. If I don't come back, you hold this house. You make them pay for every inch, and you survive, you hear me? Whatever it takes, you survive." Lydia's eyes were wet, but she nodded. Caleb moved to the side window, the one he'd deliberately left only partially boarded. He pried away the remaining boards as quietly as possible, then squeezed through the gap. The night air hit him like a slap. He dropped low immediately, listening for any sign that he'd been spotted. Nothing but gunfire and shouting from the front of the house. He circled wide, using the barn for cover, trying to get behind Victor's position. His heart hammered so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. His hands were slick with sweat despite the cool night air. He found the horses first, 4 of them, tied to a cottonwood tree about 30 yards from the house. One of the riders must be the man Lydia had wounded, which meant 3 were still active. Victor and 2 hired guns. Caleb crept closer, using every bit of cover the prairie offered. A small rise, a cluster of rocks, the burned-out remains of an old wagon he'd been meaning to clear away. He could see them now. 2 men crouched behind a water trough, taking turns firing at the house, and Victor standing further back, directing them like this was some kind of military operation. Caleb raised his rifle, aimed at the closest hired gun. Then he hesitated. He'd killed animals. Deer, rabbits, once a mountain lion that had been threatening the herd, but never a person. Never looked at another human being down the barrel of a gun and made the conscious decision to end their life. The man shifted position, and Caleb saw his face clearly in the moonlight. Young, maybe 25, probably just some drifter who'd taken Victor's money without thinking too hard about what he was being paid to do. Did that man deserve to die? The question paralyzed him for a crucial second. Then the man spotted him. "Behind us!" he shouted, swinging his rifle around. Caleb fired on instinct. The sound was enormous. The man went down hard, and Caleb didn't know if he'd killed him or just wounded him, and he didn't have time to find out because the second hired gun was already shooting, and bullets were kicking up dirt all around him. He rolled behind the wagon remnants, returned fire blindly, heard someone curse. "Mercer!" Victor's voice, high and panicked now. "You can't win this. Even if you kill all of us, there'll be more. I'll make sure of it. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Caleb didn't waste breath responding. He moved position, circled wider, trying to get a clear shot at Victor himself. If he could end this, really end it, then maybe they'd have a chance. The second hired gun was still shooting, but wildly now, scared. Caleb waited for him to reload, then broke cover and ran. The man fumbled with his rifle, panic making him clumsy. Caleb closed the distance and hit him with the butt of his own rifle. The man went down in a heap. That left Victor. Caleb found him trying to mount his horse, his expensive coat torn and muddy, his civilized veneer completely gone. He looked wild-eyed and desperate and very, very dangerous. "Don't!" Caleb said, his rifle pointed at Victor's chest. Victor froze, hands on the saddle horn. "You won't shoot me." "You sure about that? You're not a killer. I can see it in your eyes. You're a farmer, a weak man who hides behind his gun because he doesn't have the spine to fight properly. Maybe you're right, but I'm also a husband, and you threatened my wife. That broken thing isn't your wife. She's my property, and I've come to reclaim what's mine." Something in Caleb's chest went cold and hard. "She's not property. She's a person. And you spent 5 years trying to convince her otherwise, trying to break her down until she believed the lies you told about her worth." "I didn't lie. She is worthless, damaged, ruined." "No, she survived you. That makes her stronger than you'll ever be." Victor laughed, wild and bitter. "Survive? She'll never survive. I'll be in her head forever. Every time she closes her eyes, every time someone raises their voice, every time. Caleb shifted his aim slightly and fired. The bullet hit the ground right between Victor's feet. The man jumped back with a scream, nearly falling. Next one goes higher, Caleb said quietly. Your choice where? You can't kill me. The law is 12 miles away and sleeping. Out here, right now, I am the law. And the law says you leave, tonight, forever. I won't. You will. Because the alternative is I put you in the ground right here, right now, and tell the sheriff you came at me with a gun, which, looking at your coat, you probably have. Victor's hand twitched toward his inside pocket. Stopped. He was calculating odds, trying to figure out if he could draw and fire before Caleb pulled the trigger. Don't, Caleb said. You might be faster. You might get lucky. But even if you kill me, Lydia's still in that house with a rifle. And she's already proven she can shoot. So even in your best case scenario, you're still going to die tonight. The mathematics of it settled over Victor like a blanket. He could see it in the man's eyes, the moment when rage gave way to survival instinct. This isn't over, Victor said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Yeah, it is. You're going to get on your horse. You're going to ride back to town. And tomorrow you're getting on that train, just like the sheriff said. And if I ever see you near this ranch again, I won't give you a warning shot. She'll never be free of me. Never. I'll always be there, in her nightmares, in her fears. Maybe, but you won't be here, and that's enough. For a long moment, they stood there in the moonlight. Two men with guns and grievances and the kind of hate that didn't dissipate easily. Then Victor mounted his horse. You've made an enemy, Mercer. Good. I'd rather have you as an enemy out there than a threat in here. Victor pulled his horse around and spurred it hard. The animal leapt forward, and soon horse and rider were disappearing into the darkness. Caleb stood there shaking, his rifle still raised, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then his knees gave out and he sat down hard in the dirt. He'd done it, faced down a monster and sent him running. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like he'd just traded one kind of fear for another. Caleb? He looked up to find Lydia running toward him, rifle in hand, her face streaked with tears and dirt. I heard shooting, I thought. She saw the two men on the ground and went pale. Are they? One's unconscious, the other I don't know. We should check. They approached the first man carefully, the one Caleb had shot. He was alive but bleeding badly, unconscious or close to it. The second man, the one Caleb had clubbed, was groaning and holding his head. We need to get them help, Lydia said. What? They're wounded. We can't just leave them here to die. They tried to kill us. I know. But we're better than that. She looked at him. Aren't we? And Caleb realized she was right. Leaving them to bleed out would make him no better than Victor. Would make this whole night meaningless. All right. Help me get them to the house. We'll patch them up enough to survive until we can get them to town. They spent the next hour doing battlefield medicine with kitchen supplies. Bandaging wounds, stopping bleeding, making sure neither man would die before morning. It was grim work, and the men weren't grateful. But by the time the sun started to paint the eastern sky pink and gold, both of them would live. As dawn broke fully, Caleb and Lydia stood on the porch, watching the light spread across the prairie. Is it really over? Lydia asked quietly. I think so. He meant what he said, about always being in my head. Probably, but he won't be in your life, and maybe that's enough to start with. She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other up, watching a new day begin. 3 months later, Caleb was repairing the corral fence when he heard Lydia call his name. He looked up to find her standing by the house, one hand on her stomach, a strange expression on her face. You all right? He called. I'm pregnant. The words hit him like a physical blow. He dropped his hammer and crossed the yard in long strides. You're sure? Pretty sure. I've been sick every morning for 2 weeks, and I'm late, and... She looked up at him with eyes that were scared and hopeful in equal measure. I think we're going to have a baby. Caleb pulled her into his arms, held her tight, felt her shaking against him. Is this okay? She asked. I know we never talked about children. I know I'm probably not ready to be a mother. I know it's more than okay. His voice broke. It's perfect. Even though I'm still broken, you're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. They stood there in the morning sun, holding each other, thinking about the future that was suddenly very real and very close. Victor never came back. They heard through Bill Hutchins that he'd left Kansas and gone back east. Some said he'd lost most of his money in a bad investment. Others said he'd taken up drinking and was slowly destroying himself from the inside. Lydia didn't care which story was true. He was gone, and that was enough. The baby came in early spring, a girl with Lydia's eyes and Caleb's stubborn chin. They named her Martha after the wife he'd lost, and Sarah after Lydia's mother. Holding that tiny, perfect life in her arms, Lydia finally understood what freedom felt like. Not the absence of fear. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at loud noises, still had days where the weight of what Victor had done threatened to crush her. But freedom wasn't about being undamaged. It was about having the space and safety to heal at your own pace. It was about knowing that the bad days would pass, and there would be good days waiting on the other side. It was about looking at your husband across the dinner table and seeing partnership instead of ownership. About watching your daughter sleep and knowing she'd grow up never understanding why anyone would think she was worthless. It was about choosing trust even when fear said not to. About building something new from broken pieces. About learning that survival wasn't the same as living, but sometimes it was a necessary first step. 1 year after Martha Sarah was born, Lydia stood in the garden she'd planted and expanded, watching Caleb teach their daughter to touch the horses gently. The baby was too young to really understand, but she laughed when Rosie's nose tickled her palm, and the sound was pure joy. Sheriff Daniels had stopped by the week before with news. Victor Hale was dead. Fell down a flight of stairs while drunk. Broke his neck. Quick, if not exactly painless. Lydia had expected to feel something when she heard. Relief, maybe. Or vindication. Or even grief for the man her stepfather might have been if he'd chosen differently. But all she felt was a distant sort of closure, like finishing a book she'd never wanted to read in the first place. "You all right?" Caleb had asked, watching her face. "I think so. Is that wrong? That I don't feel more?" "No. You get to feel however you feel. There's no right way to react to losing someone who hurt you." "I don't think I lost him. I think I finally got free of him." "Then that's how you feel." Now, standing in her garden with dirt under her nails and the Kansas sun on her face, Lydia realized something profound. The hardest battles really were fought inside, not against external enemies, though those were real enough, but against the voices in your head that said you weren't worth saving, that you deserved the pain, that you'd always be broken. Those voices sounded like Victor, but they lived in her mind. And unlike Victor, she couldn't just banish them with a gun and harsh words. She had to choose every single day not to believe them. Some days were easier than others. Some days she succeeded. Some days she failed and had to try again tomorrow. But that was life, she was learning. Not a straight line from broken to whole, but a messy, complicated journey with setbacks and victories and a lot of ordinary days in between. The boldest act really wasn't pulling a trigger or standing up to your abuser in front of witnesses, though those things mattered. The boldest act was choosing to trust again after trust had been weaponized against you. Choosing to hope after hope had been beaten down repeatedly. Choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, you deserved the good things that were happening. Caleb walked over with Martha in his arms. The baby was babbling happily, reaching for Lydia with chubby hands. "Someone wants her mama," he said, handing her over. Lydia took their daughter, breathed in that sweet baby smell, felt the solid weight of this tiny person who depended on her completely. "I'm terrified I'll mess her up," Lydia admitted, "that I'll pass on all my damage to her." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're already thinking about it, already trying to be better. That's more than most people do." He put his arm around both of them. "Besides, you're not alone in this. We'll mess her up together." Lydia laughed despite herself. "That's a terrible reassurance." "It's honest, though." "Yeah, it is." They stood there together, the three of them, in a garden that Lydia had planted with her own hands on land that was truly hers. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined this moment, couldn't have believed it was possible. But here it was, not perfect, not healed completely, but real and solid and worth fighting for. The Kansas frontier had taught her many things. that survival was possible even when it seemed impossible, that kindness existed even in harsh places, that love could be built from practical choices and mutual respect, not just passion and romance. And most importantly, that the person you were after trauma didn't have to be defined by the trauma itself. You could carry scars and still plant gardens, could have nightmares and still raise children, could be broken in some places and strong in others. You could be all of those things at once and still be worthy of love, of safety, of a future that looked nothing like your past. As the sun moved across the sky and Martha dozed in her arms and Caleb stood beside her solid and steady, Lydia made a promise to herself. She would remember Victor. Not to honor him or give him power, but to remember what she'd survived, to remember how far she'd come, to remember that she was stronger than he'd ever wanted her to believe. But she wouldn't let him own her anymore, not her present, not her future, not the woman she was becoming. He'd taken 5 years of her life. She wouldn't give him one more day. That evening, after Martha was asleep and the chores were done, Lydia and Caleb sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asked. "Answering my letter? Taking on all my problems?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering. "No, but I'd be lying if I said it was what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone to help with the ranch, share the work, make the lonely days less lonely." "And what did you get?" "Someone who taught me what courage really looks like. Someone who showed me that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what needs doing anyway." He took her hand. "I got a partner, a real one. Not perfect, but real. I'm still afraid sometimes. I know. I still have days where I can't get out of bed, where the weight of everything is too much. I know that too. And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with you, all of you, the strong parts and the broken parts and everything in between." Lydia leaned her head on his shoulder, felt his arm come around her. "I love you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I've ever said that out loud." "You haven't." "Well, I do. Love you. Not because you saved me. I'm still not sure anyone can save anyone else, but because you gave me space to save myself. That's all I ever wanted to do." They sat there until the stars filled the sky. Two people who'd found each other through desperation and built something lasting through patience and trust. The Kansas frontier could be brutal, could break people down and spit them out and leave them for dead. But it could also be the place where broken things learned to grow again, where people who thought they were finished got a second chance, where the harsh beauty of the land matched the harsh beauty of survival. Lydia had come to Kansas running from death. She'd found life instead. Not an easy life, not a simple one, but hers. Truly, finally, hers. And as she sat there under the stars with her husband's arm around her shoulders and her daughter sleeping safely inside, she understood something that would have seemed impossible a year ago. She was happy. Not perfectly, not without complications, but genuinely deeply happy in a way that had nothing to do with forgetting the past and everything to do with choosing the future. The gun she'd pointed at Victor that night remained in the house, loaded and ready, just in case. Some lessons stayed learned, but next to it on the shelf was a rattle Caleb had carved for Martha, a book of poems Lydia was teaching herself to read, a photograph of the three of them taken by a traveling photographer who'd passed through town, symbols of survival standing beside symbols of life. Both necessary, both real. That was the truth no one told you about healing. It wasn't about erasing the damage or pretending the bad things never happened. It was about building something new alongside the old scars, about letting joy and pain exist in the same space without one destroying the other. It was about understanding that you could hold a gun in one hand and a baby in the other, and both were acts of love. The frontier demanded that kind of complexity. The frontier didn't forgive, didn't forget, didn't offer second chances easily. But if you were stubborn enough, if you refused to give up even when giving up seemed reasonable, if you learned to see strength in survival instead of weakness in scars, then maybe, just maybe, you could build something worth having from nothing but determination and hope. Lydia had learned that lesson the hard way, had paid for it in blood and tears and years of her life she'd never get back. But looking at what she had now, at the family and home and future she'd built from the wreckage of her past, she knew with absolute certainty it had been worth it. Every terrifying moment, every setback, every day she'd had to choose trust over fear. All of it had led here, to this porch, this man, this child, this life. And she wouldn't trade it for anything, not even for a past without pain, because pain had taught her things that comfort never could, about resilience, about the depth of human cruelty and the surprising persistence of human kindness, about her own capacity to endure and eventually to thrive. The scars would always be there. The nightmares would probably never fully stop. The damage Victor had done was real and lasting and unfair. But so was this moment of peace, this feeling of safety, this knowledge that she'd survived and kept surviving and would continue to survive whatever came next. That was victory. Not the dramatic kind from stories where the hero defeats the villain and everything is suddenly perfect, but the quiet, daily kind, where you wake up and choose to keep going, where you look at your wounds and tend them instead of hiding them, where you let people love you even though love has been used as a weapon before. That kind of victory didn't make for easy tales, but it was real, and it was hers. As the night deepened and Caleb's breathing evened out beside her, and somewhere inside Martha made those tiny sleep sounds that never failed to make Lydia's heart overflow. She made one more promise. She would tell this story to her daughter someday, when Martha was old enough to understand, would tell her about fear and survival and the long road from victim to survivor to something more, would tell her that strength came in many forms, that healing wasn't linear, that you could be terrified and brave at the same time, would tell her that the world wasn't always kind, but that didn't mean you had to let it make you cruel, would teach her to recognize the difference between a man who wanted to own her and a man who wanted to know her, between love and possession, between discipline and abuse, would give her all the weapons Lydia had never had, not just physical weapons, though those too, but the kind of weapons that lived in your mind and heart, self-worth, boundaries. The knowledge that she deserved to be treated with respect would raise her to be strong but not hard, careful but not afraid, kind but not naive, would show her, through living it, that you could survive terrible things and still build a beautiful life. That was the final victory over Victor. Not his death, though that helped, but this, raising a daughter who would never know his kind of fear, who would grow up understanding her own worth, who would never question whether she deserved kindness, breaking the cycle, building something new, choosing, every single day, to be better than what had been done to her. That was how you won against monsters. Not by becoming one yourself, not by letting them break you permanently, but by healing, by growing, by refusing to let their poison spread to the next generation. As Lydia sat there under the Kansas stars, holding the hand of a man who'd chosen partnership over ownership, thinking about the daughter sleeping safely inside, she finally understood what freedom really meant. It meant this moment, this choice, this life. Hard-won and imperfect and absolutely worth fighting for. And as the night wrapped around them like a blanket and the prairie wind whispered through the grass and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Lydia chose to stop looking back and start looking forward. The past would always be there. The scars wouldn't fade. The memories wouldn't disappear. But they didn't have to define her future. She got to write that story herself. And it was going to be a good one.